Okay, this is Jen Archuleta, acting chair, calling to order the Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee meeting for November 19th, 2020. Right now, we're going to do a roll call. Scott Miller, absent. Heather Williams.
Here.
Jim Krug is absent. I'm Jen Archuleta. Paula Fitzgerald.
I'm here.
Stephen Myrick.
I'm here.
Trace Baker.
Here.
Ann Obenchain.
Here.
And Tony Lewis.
Here.
Excellent. Okay, next on the agenda, approval of the October 22nd, 2020 meeting minutes. Do I have any motions on that?
I had a question about
Sure.
the minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and this is because I'm new, but we requested, it says here that we move to postpone recommendation of the item. Do we state why in these minutes, or should we be stating why?
It's not in the minutes because it's in the actual video.
Okay,
People,
thank you for that clarification.
any other questions, comments, concerns? Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
If I could ask that when people make motions and second, if they could please say their name.
Oops, sorry. It was
Yeah.
Paula Fitzgerald who moved.
And
Trace
Obenchain
Baker second. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
And all opposed? Any abstentions? Anyone who wasn't here? Okay, moving on to our first presentation is the Chandler Acquisition. And I believe that is Sandy Duff this evening.
Hi, good evening. This is Sandy Duff, Senior Land Officer with the Real Estate Division. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. And I'm going to assume that's working. Tonight we are here, we are proposing to acquire approximately 40 acres of irrigated farmland along with 20 shares of left-hand ditch and 0.05 shares of the Williamson ditch for $1,250,000. The property, you're not seeing it? Okay, wait. How about that?
There it is.
You got it? Okay, great. Thank you. The property is located, here's the vicinity map, and that's the general location of the property. It's near Niwot. And the property is owned by Daryl and Geraldine Chandler, and it lies near the intersection of North 81st Street and Oxford Road, and it's here in the teal color. The property is immediately to the west of our J Road Church of Christ property, which is farmed by a gentleman, Michael Moss, with Kilt Farm. The property is prime agricultural land of national importance, and it's irrigated. And it's been a priority for the county acquisition for many years. And the property is an important piece of the Niwot area community buffer, and it provides scenic land along the diagonal highway. So I've got a couple of pictures here. This is looking kind of south from Oxford Road, and you can see the diagonal over here. There's a big Quonset hunt on the property. I believe that'll stay there, but the rest of the items out there right now would be removed. And that's just this wetland pond area at the north of the property, but it's just pretty. And that's looking down towards the south, going south on the property. And as you come down this two-track, over to the west is big, beautiful agricultural land. And then directly south there is more, and then over to the east, and there's the diagonal. And that's looking back up towards the north. And that's looking down south again. And here's just a view from Google, because I wasn't going to stop and stand on the diagonal and take a picture. But that's the property there. The county is proposing to pay $1,250,000 for the property. It does include 20 shares of left-hand ditch and 0.05 shares of the Williamson ditch. We do intend to later sell the property subject to a conservation easement, which would ensure continued agricultural use of the property. But if we're going to do something like that, we'll finalize it and we'd be presenting it to you for consideration at a later date. This acquisition will remove one development right, and we will also be purchasing all mineral rights owned by the sellers. Boulder County's Community Planning and Permitting Department has determined that the Chandler property has one development right. And due to its 40-acre size and vacant status, the property qualifies for a total of 2 TDRs, and those are transferable development rights. The TDR certificates would be issued in the seller's name, signed by the seller at closing, and then turned over to Boulder County as part of the purchase price for the county's purchase of the property. Boulder County will hold these TDRs for future sale or future conversion to TDCs for sale. And in our Boulder County comp plan designations, the property is significant agricultural land of national importance, and it's prime irrigated land. And the score on the view, I think it's called our View Protection Corridor map. You can see here, it's kind of 1.46. It's probably just because it's right there on the diagonal, but I think as a lot of us know, it's just beautiful to look out and see the ag land. So we're really excited to limit any future development there. So staff is, the property is used for ag right now, I said, and the property will be closed to public use, and it will be for agricultural purposes. And we are recommending approval for the purchase of the Chandler property. It's long been on our priority list for open space and acquisition by Parks and Open Space. And the Chandlers are now ready to sell the property to the county. We've been in contact and contacting them for many, many years. The purchase will eliminate any future residential development on the property, and it will remain in agricultural uses. And preserving prime agricultural land is one of the values of our open space program, and as is preserving the county's scenic corridors. So we're asking for the action tonight by your board is recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to approve the request as described tonight, and as you had in your memo. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sandy. Does POSAC have any questions for Sandy?
I do.
Trace.
Yeah. Go ahead, Trace.
Here? Okay. Let's see. Sandy, you mentioned the acronym TDC, and it wasn't defined in the presentation. Could you tell me what that is, please?
So the TDC is a transferable development credit, and then that is different than the transferable development right certificates. So do you need further?
Nope, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll write that out next time. Thank you, Trace.
Other questions?
Yes, Steve Myrick. Yeah. I am trying to understand the advantage of going through this process. If the use by right is one development right, that means a person could place one home, presumably, on this property. And it would have to go through a site plan review. So the county really ultimately could control where that home was located so that it could be out of a view corridor. So tell me what the advantage is of if the owners sold it to one person without any county involvement or expense. Why is it better for the county to acquire it? What are we getting in exchange for that we wouldn't get with one development right on the property, assuming that I recognize there's water rights associated with it, but assume the purchaser came along, bought the 40 acres, there's limits on the size of the house. We could control through site plan review where the house was in terms of affecting the view corridor, and that person, say, acquired the water rights. Why should we go through this process and give the 2 development rights to the sellers?
Oh, those two TDRs would be remaining with the county, so those wouldn't be going back to the seller.
Okay, but what's the advantage? I don't get it.
Like we have done, I would say, with a lot of our purchases, is removing that development right for perpetuity. That's a lot of what we have done and is part of our program. And I don't know if Janice would like to chime in, or Eric or anybody else.
I'd be happy to, if you like. Hold on, start my video. Janice Wisman, Real Estate Division Manager, and Sandy and I work together. So one of the primary tenets of our open space program is to preserve the rural character of the county, and particularly in areas where there is a scenic view corridor like the Diagonal Highway. And this property has also been identified by the Niwot community as being something they'd like to see preserved in its present state. So there's a lot of support from past history of all of the things that brought us to today in our open space program to keep a property like this from being developed on. And at the end of the day, if we can keep it in agriculture and if we can keep a house off of it, that will benefit the open space program tremendously. We don't necessarily need to own it, which is why we're hoping to turn around and find a deal with a conservation buyer that would be perhaps the tenant that's next door, who works already on and leases county open space adjacent to this. But the Chandlers are ready to sell, and so our only opportunity to protect this piece of property really is right now. Otherwise, it will have a house on it. And to answer your question specifically about what's the benefit, I think that the primary benefit is keeping it in completely in agricultural use, keeping the scenic corridor there, and protecting the features that it has today.
Well, let me follow up with, I don't want to say, I know we have a busy agenda. I mean, through site plan review, one could control the location of the home, correct?
That's correct. It would still be a house there. And we're trying to prevent that because we're trying to preserve the current rural character of the county rather than allow additional development in areas where through the comprehensive planning process and the Parks and Open Space program processes, we've determined we'd rather not have a house. So this is a prime property. It's been on our priority list since the mid 1970s when the citizens and people who participated in the comprehensive planning process at that time suggested that land along the diagonal be protected, and our agricultural resources staff are very interested still today in seeing that be protected and not having any house at all on it.
Thank you.
Even, and I might just interject, I mean, I think the big opportunity here is that we keep the property in agricultural production. If it's sold as a 40-acre ranchette, there's zero guarantee that the new owners would choose to keep it or improve it for agricultural production. And since we do have agricultural property immediately adjacent to it, we think it's a good opportunity to help a tenant expand operations immediately proximate to their existing farm.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, are there any public comments in person or online? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to request a motion from POSAC.
Trace Baker, I move approval of the transactions as described by staff.
And
Tony Lewis, I second.
Who sent, I'm sorry, who seconded it? Seconded it?
Both Ann and I.
Okay, all right, cool. Is there any discussion from POSAC for this? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and vote on this item. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain. Thank you.
Okay. Who was that abstained?
Steve Myrick.
See, your camera is just catching the sort of the top half of your face.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah,
That's
I get
okay.
it.
I'm very sorry about
That
that.
no worries. I couldn't see your mouth moving.
Oh,
so-
no problem. I apologize.
No problem. All right, so the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good,
everybody.
Sandy.
Thank you,
Okay,
Sandy.
thank you.
Okay, on to the next item agenda. The management plan update for Carol Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm. That will be presented by Marnie Ratzel.
Good evening, POSAC. Are you ready for me to just jump right in?
Yeah, jump in.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. One moment while I get that figured out. Okay, here we go. All right. So I am Marnie Ratzel. I'm a resource planner in resource planning here at Parks and Open Space. And I'm excited to share with you the draft management plan for Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm. I've got several staff here also to assist me tonight. Let's see, there we go. Quick overview. I have a lot to cover, but this time is yours. And so I want to make sure that we use it to what works best for you. In your staff memo, I included a link to the public meeting that we had on October 27th, and also to the plan. I've got about 40 slides, and I can go as fast or as slow through those. Starting with the existing, a little bit on the plan development and the existing resources and uses. If you had an opportunity to take a look at the materials that were shared at the open house, we could shorten that time. But again, you pace me and let me know what works best for you. I'll cover some public input, go through some proposed plan changes, which are outlined in your memo. And I also want to talk a little bit about some of the recommendations, and I won't highlight all of them because there are many. We can answer any of those through questions and answers. So we started this process back in just about a little over a year ago, in fall of 2019 with internal scoping. We were lucky enough to have a in-person open house right before COVID hit. And that gave us some good information to allow us to move into plan development that we did through the rest of the spring and summer. We published a draft plan in October, and that brings us to you tonight. And based on your recommendations, we will bring the plan forward. We're scheduled to bring it forward to the commissioners in December. We have a pretty large interdisciplinary team that's been working on this. This is the whole list. Now this includes a group that we usually break our management teams into a small team that does the lion's share of the work, and then a few folks that we pull in as needed, and then our management and executive team. What I wanted to demonstrate is just that this management plan, and most of our management planning, pulls in an interdisciplinary team from across the department. If you have any questions about that. So the plan that was posted for your review and for public input has 5 chapters. The bulk of that, in terms of what we are recommending for refinement, is in chapter 3. We talk about the planning process and how we went about this in chapter 1, give an update in chapter 2, bring you to some management recommendations, and then talk more about that public engagement. So a little bit about Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm. It's located in southeast Boulder County, and it was purchased back in 1980, primarily because surrounding, if I can use my cursor, here we go. Surrounding the preserve, we have lots of development, and it's grown in development since we purchased it back in 1980. And it was purchased for the agricultural significant lands that we have here, as well as to create an open space buffer between the communities that surround it. Agriculture is a big part of the landscape. However, there's a lot going on here. A portion of the property, we have the Birds of Prey Foundation. This is one of our properties that also has a trail system and has recreational access. A lot of our agricultural lands are closed to recreational users, and Carolyn Holmberg is an exception to that. It's a cultural landscape. We have wildlife habitats, and I'm going to run through each of those. One of the big parts of the plan includes maps of each of these, so I'm going to share those with you next. And let me go ahead. There we go. With all that is happening on this property, it essentially encompasses all of the resources that make up the mission for Parks and Open Space. We have natural, cultural, and agricultural resources. And as I mentioned, with the recreational access, we do provide public uses on the property. Given the fact that we have a lot of uses and a lot of resources on this property, one of the first steps that the team did is to come up with a proposed vision, and that helps us to guide the future management direction. This is included in your memo, so you don't have to read through it right here. But essentially, what we are looking to do is to appropriately function with the ecological processes, protection and preservation of the sensitive resources, and preserve the compatible uses while allowing people to use the land. So I'm going to quickly go through each of the different resources that we have on the property. There are a lot of historic resources, 18 historic sites, including both prehistoric and historic sites. And what's interesting is that we've only been able to survey about 39% of the property. So there might even be more resources, in particular, some fossils and dinosaur archaeological finds. As I mentioned, much of the property is designated as nationally and locally important agricultural land, with the soil and water resources laying the foundation for the other natural resources that I'll run through next. So the property also contains 2 riparian creeks. We've got Rock Creek that runs here, and a tributary, actually Rock Creek goes here, and we've got Buffalo Gulch is a tributary that also runs through the property. We've got wetlands concentrated in the southern part of the property and over here near Stearns Lake. And then native grasslands that are primarily in the southern portion and in this portion below the railroad track. There's the railroad track here. And there's also some natural grasses, remnants down in this southern portion of the property. You can see that a little bit better on here with the vegetation alliances, just how many of those alliances do exist in that southern portion of the property. Critical wildlife habitat, the 40-acre Burring Owl Preserve located up here is one, and then Buffalo Gulch and Rock Creek are also critical wildlife, are a designated critical wildlife habitat. We have a number of many different species of wildlife. The habitat supports burring owls, northern leopard frogs, a diverse array of raptors and migratory birds, including a pair of bald eagles that established a territory back in 2012. Essentially, Rock Creek Farm provides ample food supply, mostly with prairie dogs and other mammals, as well as some of the fish at Stearns Lake. Lastly, we also have 3 operating oil and gas wells. You just heard a little bit from Sandy talking about some of the mineral rights that come with properties. The county does own some of the mineral rights under the property, but much of those rights are leased that are active on the property. And the county doesn't have a decision-making role in the management or extraction of those. We also can share that we don't have any known plans for new or refined production of oil and gas rights. This is a map that you'll see a little bit more frequently throughout the presentation. It shows the agricultural fields. You can see here that in blue, that's cropland, and it's primarily in the northern part of the property, with rangeland, grasslands situated mostly in the southern portion of the property. One of the things that I wanted to point out that's also explained a little bit more in your memo, field 65 is mentioned, and you can see that it is designated as rangeland. There's a portion of this field that was designated as dryland cropland in the 2002 plan. And more recently, the intent is to manage that land to return it to grasslands. So we've been planting a cover crop in that dryland cropland. So we wanted to correct that. There's about 65 acres of dryland cropland that is occurring on field 65, part of that, the designation from the 2002 plan. In terms of the recreational and existing facilities, on the east side of the property that's accessed by Highway 287, that's where the agricultural operation headquarters are located. We also have the Goodhue Farmhouse that offers meeting space. And then the birds of prey have their flight cages over in this portion of the property. There is a parking lot to access the Goodhue House, but it's really not used by recreationalists coming to the property. Most of those uses are over here, more on the western side off of 104th Street. You've got the Stearns Lake Trailhead. You've got the Birds of Prey Intensive Care Unit, which is just south of the trailhead. And then, as I mentioned, the Rock Creek regional trail system runs through the heart of the property. There's about 3.3 miles that run through Carolyn Holmberg Preserve, and it's part of a greater system connecting Rock Creek and Coal Creek. It's about 25 miles that connects communities throughout Boulder County. With the 1,100 acres on this property, you do get a lot of visitors. Visitation has increased significantly. We have about 75,000 people that visit annually. Primarily, they're enjoying biking, hiking, and fishing activities at Stearns Lake. You can see on this slide that the people are most likely, our visitors are most likely to be coming locally from Broomfield, Lafayette, and Louisville, which are the communities that, that are adjacent to Carolyn Holmberg Preserve. So with all of this that's happening, the management of the resources and uses on the property is pretty complex. This is one of our properties that we've had a few different management plans over the years to try to better balance all the uses that we have here. The 2020 plan is no exception. The updated draft management plan intends to balance the multiple uses, provide staff with direction and a common vision of what Carolyn Holmberg could look like in the future, and guide management direction to achieve the identified uses and values. What you're seeing here are 13 planning issues that we identified as a team. We began with an initial list, got some public feedback, and refined those to these 13 planning issues. The 6 on the left side of your screen are ones that really involve an intersection between resource uses. And essentially that means that there's some degree of compromise to reduce conflict, and with the goal of still ensuring that the values and vision of the property can be sustainably achieved. I'm going to focus on those tonight in my recommendations. The ones 7 through 13 are a set of issues that we've identified for refinement, mostly because we need to improve the stewardship or address some aging infrastructure. or adapt to some of the increasing demands for the services on the property. And part of why I'm focusing the ones on 1 through 6 is that these also are the ones that we heard from people in our public engagement. So I'll jump to that now. With the plan to solicit public input, we created a project webpage, and we did community outreach both through direct mail and flyers at trailheads, press releases, and social media. And that's how we were able to have people join us at the initial, for the initial comment period of developing the plan, and then reviewing the draft plan that was posted on October 19th. We had a virtual public meeting, as I mentioned, on October 27th. And we have a comment form that was posted for the first part, and now we have a new comment form for comments and input on the draft plan. So in the initial input on the plan, we had 86 comments that were received. I came to POSAC in April, I think that was. And so that was kind of early on. We had gotten some comments prior to coming to you, and then we had that comment form available to people through August. It was closed, I think, September 2nd. So I wanted to share with you just kind of the overarching thing that we heard from, input that we heard from people that was considered and really helped shape the plan. Overall, I think that the comments that we received demonstrated a depth of knowledge and an understanding of a desire to and need to better balance the uses. Protecting the bald eagles and the prairie dogs, that has been a theme both throughout the whole process. And people really enjoy the property and want to continue to recreate here and have some amenities that they'd like to do that. More recently, when we posted the draft plan through yesterday, and I don't think there were any comments today, but through yesterday, our comments, we had 61 comments received, a number of organizations that have submitted comments. And while there were additional comments beyond just these were really the ones that came up frequently. People expressing interest in the prairie dogs and expressing some concern for the change in the land designation, which I'll go over in a moment. Interest in setting some limits on how many prairie dogs might be removed. And also from our adjacent property owners, support for barriers to contain any encroachment to those adjacent properties. With respect to wildlife, there's an interest to minimize the disturbance to the bald eagle's nest that have established or have been present on the property. A recognition that prairie dogs also do offer prey, and wanting to preserve that critical wildlife habitat. And then lastly, for grasslands, most folks support the restoration and also recognize the impact of both prairie dog and livestock grazing activities on the land. On November 5th, we brought the plan to the Historic Preservation Advisory Board. The property, pretty much all of the property is designated as a historic landmark. And they were very appreciative to hear about the plan and also see how integrated the plan is with respect to historic and paleontological resources. Given that we only have 39% of the property that's been surveyed, they're very interested in ensuring that we fund and conduct the complete cultural survey of the property. And also, one of the things that we did was added a native land and cultural heritage acknowledgement at the start of the plan. They really appreciated that. And it's something that Parks and Open Space is working on with Boulder County overall. So I think we'll see more of that. And it's nice to have Carolyn Holmberg be blazing that trail. So based on the feedback that we received on the draft plan, there are a number of proposed changes to the management plan document itself. I've included those in your memo. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of those, but what I'd like to do is talk a little bit more about the recommendations that that folks had the most, that we had the most public input on. So one of the desires was to better understand what our acreages are. What you're seeing here is Carolyn Holmberg Preserve does have black-tailed prairie dogs. They're one of the most apparent and readily observable species on the land. And we have all three designations for prairie dog land designations on the property. What is in red is no prairie dog, where we do most of our prairie dog management. That's where our cropland is focused. In the southern part, and then also the Burring Owl Preserve. These are multi-objective areas where the prairie dogs coexist with other uses, such as livestock grazing and the grasslands. And then what you're seeing in green here is habitat conservation area. And this, we've included, one of the changes that we're recommending is to detail these acreages in the plan. The draft plan did not include those. With respect to agricultural uses, I talked a little bit already about the dryland, cropland, and rangeland here. This is totaling up the different uses. Mostly we have irrigated cropland and rangeland, with just that bit of dryland cropland that is currently a cover crop to try with the intent of returning to grasslands. Okay, so for recommendations, they are numbered, so I'm going to go through a few of those, or go through numbers 1 through 6. The first one is looking at the designation and use of the 40-acre Burring Owl Preserve, using the agricultural field type map as a way to talk about these. That is identified as field 7. And we're recommending that that the Burring Owl Preserve be that the land designation be changed to no prairie dog cropland, and we would relocate prairie dogs to another place within the Boulder County land system. The idea is as you can see, that that Burring Owl Preserve is surrounded by land designated for no prairie dogs because it is cropland. And the containment of the prairie dogs is a high maintenance activity. The preserve was designated back in the late 90s, I believe. It was previously dryland cropland, and the intent is to return it to cropland and ultimately irrigate it in the future. What we'd like to do is also change the designation of field 65 and reclaim it as perennial grassland, and better support a contiguous wildlife habitat area with grasslands, both not only on field 65, but throughout this whole area and here on the south, for grassland restoration. Still allowing some livestock grazing, but the livestock grazing would be deferred until after we plant the cover crop and we can restore the grasses. this recommendation, in terms of what it would mean for the land designations, it would have a change in the MOA land located up here now. That would become NPD land. It's about 40 acres. And that's what you're seeing in the changes between the existing and proposed acres of those two designations. For agricultural uses, that field 65 would no longer be cultivated, and that dryland cropland would cease to exist. It would become the rangeland that we are showing here. Oh, and I'm sorry, field 7, we would change the number of acres of irrigated cropland. So with the objective to improve health and ecosystem function of the grasslands, the second planning issue recommends refinements to how the rangeland fields are managed and used. One of the valuable and limited resources at Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm is the intact grasslands on the south here in the habitat restoration area. And then, as I mentioned, we have some remnants down in this area. We call this area Parrot's Beak, down here south of Buffalo Gulch. And there are some native grasses there as well. Although there are other fields that contain grasslands that are in fair condition, the overall health is related to the impacts on the land by the prairie dogs, and livestock grazing also has an impact, excuse me, but to a bit of a lesser extent. So in considering options about how to restore the grasslands, given the fact that prairie dogs are a part of the landscape, and as is the agriculture, we have looked at keeping things as it is, status quo, from keeping things as it is all the way to removal of prairie dogs. And same with keeping the status quo or eliminating grazing altogether. We had a lot of discussions around all the different options, including thinning prairie dogs or doing some rolling removals to allow complete restoration and then reintroducing. Same for the livestock grazing, considering prescriptive plan. And it's probably no surprise that we landed somewhere here in the middle with the recommendation of thinning prairie dogs, with the goal is to better strike a balance between the presence of the prairie dogs on the landscape and the recovery of the vegetation components and the native grasslands and perennial grasses. With prescriptive grazing, in order to establish those grasses, we would have a respite for 2 to 5 years, and then meet annually to talk about which portions of the land might be ready to reintroduce grazing. The grazing, in having an adaptive management approach, can be part of the life cycle and is an important component to consider when it's appropriate to reintroduce. The next topic is a little bit more on prairie dog management. The other pieces of prairie dog management are that we do have some encroachment onto our adjacent private properties. The recommendations here are essentially to maintain the current land designations for the prairie dogs, with the exception of that field 7, that 40-acre preserve, and then to install barriers along the northern property boundary west of 104th Street to minimize any encroachment to the private properties to the north. And then from the HCA, we currently have an existing barrier, but we've got some deferred maintenance. So we want to go in and repair that to help with any of the encroachment that's happening there. The plan also recommends changes to management of livestock grazing in the riparian corridors because the availability of water resources are good along the riparian corridor. We are seeing some of the livestock grazing happening there. A priority within the riparian corridors is preserving wildlife habitat and plant communities. And certainly these areas can provide good forage at certain times of the year. We are recommending that we do a prescriptive grazing plan, very similar to the grasslands overall on the land, where we meet annually and determine where the land can support that grazing, and also ensuring that that water source is available. Okay, couple more minutes to talk a little bit about the interface between wildlife and our trail system, and also some of the increased demand that we are seeing on the property by offering some recommendations for trails and trailheads. So currently, the yellow line that you're seeing through the property is the current trail system. The majority of that is a regional trail, Rock Creek Regional Trail, coming this way through here. You've got just the spur coming from Stearns Lake, and then another spur coming from the Lockamore neighborhood going into Broomfield to the south. I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these, but I'm going to do so in a way that talks about it relative to what's happening with the wildlife closures. So looking at east of 104th Street to Stearns Lake, we currently have a closure of the portion of the regional trail here, and that's due to support the potential of a pair of bald eagles nesting in this area. They've been in the vicinity of Carolyn Holmberg Preserve, as I mentioned, since 2012, and they had a nest on the property, but it was a different location. And there's a possibility that they might be nesting here in 2020. We're not 100% sure if they're going to select this nest, but we have closed this section of the trail to support them because there's a good possibility that they will continue to stay on the property. We're recommending that we consider a new trail along 104th Street that would allow more flexibility and preserve that regional connection during the seasonal closures that we envision might happen in the future. Boulder County works with CPW and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to consider the protections of wildlife, and we work with them and their recommendations in relation to the recreation, the agricultural operations, and the regional trails. And we'll continue to take their lead with those recommendations. So our recommendation here is that if the bald eagles do continue to nest here on the property, that we would continue to have seasonal closures. And as I mentioned, in order to have flexibility, we're looking to create a trail along South 104th Street for that portion of the Rock Creek Regional Trail. We also have a wildlife closure that we've experienced due to burrowing owls on the property. And that's another portion of the Cradleboard Trail. The Cradleboard Trail has been closed 4 times in, I think it's since the past 12 years that they've been nesting on the property. So that long-term utilization sometimes results in the closure, but we do need a long-term solution with a safe alternative for the regional trail because of those closures. So the recommendation here is to have a trail along the north property boundary from Brainerd Road to 104th Street. This would serve as a detour when and if that portion of the cradle board is closed, and also would offer additional access to users that are coming from the property or visitors coming from the property from points west and just from Brainerd Road as well. The second piece is we'd like to reserve, the second recommendation is that we'd like to reserve a potential future trail along what is a historic railroad bed. This alignment is perched up a little bit because it is a historic railroad. So it's part of the area that's not in production, but it is between fields. The increased visitation to the property, as well as the need to potentially route folks along Brainerd. Brainerd is a road that is very lightly traveled. We sometimes get some folks walking along here, certainly biking. This would allow for users to have to enhance their visitor experience and ensure that they have a more safe connection. It also could offer a loop trail. Due to the cost of this, we aren't recommending it in the near term. It might be something to consider 10 years from now, or as we either as funding becomes available or as use becomes, as that demand grows. So we'd like to, the recommendation is to reserve that. The sixth topic, or the sixth planning issue, is recreation and visitor access. And part of that is the trailheads. So although we have many visitors coming to Carolyn Holmberg Preserve on foot or by bike, we recognize that we have a need for additional parking for those that either don't live nearby or might be coming with horses, for example. So the primary access point into the open space is from the Stearns Lake Trailhead from South 104th Street. And then we also have many visitors that park in an unimproved area along Brainerd Road. That's where they can access the Cradleboard Trail. Parking in that area along Brainerd is often unsafe because of steep shoulders and muddy conditions. People have gotten stuck there. There's a need to increase demand from both of these locations, partially because of how the network and how folks access the property. It's 104th Street is a dead end street onto the property, and then Brainerd is as well, and they have folks coming from each side. So with respect to the 104th Street and Stearns Lake, the primary access point, we've observed as many as 15 vehicles parked along the road during peak periods. And there isn't formal equestrian parking. So the recommendation is to place a new trailhead at South 104th Street that would include about spaces for about 10 vehicles and 4 horse trailers. And we are also looking to redesign that area. It gets a little confusing with the farm roads. The second recommendation for trailheads is to develop a new trailhead at the Brainerd Road junction with the Cradleboard Trail. Probably looking at about 10 to 15 vehicles. Due to the topography, we couldn't put it exactly where that access gate is, so a little bit to the north or a little bit to the south is what we'd be looking to do based on what would be the best experience and in coordinating with the city and county of Broomfield as well. So I'd like to just talk for a moment about the next steps. We're interested in having the POSAC members provide us a recommendation to the Boulder County Commissioners adopting the plan. Of course, we do have some changes that we've outlined for your consideration, and my expectation is that we'll have some changes to incorporate into the plan document. We would then share a final plan for the Commissioner's consideration, and that is scheduled for December 15th. For the public, we continue to allow comments to be received using the online form. And if folks get those in by December 7th, I can certainly share that information as part of the presentation that I'll have to the commissioners. So that wraps up the overview of my presentation. And I would like to know if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you, Marnie. That was great. Do we have any questions from POSAC?
Yes, Trace Baker here. There was, looking at your memo, I noticed that there were at least 4 public comments concerning the possibility of removing 99.9% of the prairie dogs from the multiple objective area. And your corrected memo includes a paragraph beginning, staff will develop a formalized methodology for managing the prairie dogs in this area. And it includes ensuring the maintenance of the critical social structure of the prairie dogs as well as vegetation response. But I didn't see the methodology including a impact on the eagles and other predators that use the prairie dogs as food. So given that the public has so much interest in this topic, I've got 4 questions on the methodology. 1, will it include a study of impacts on predators?
I'm going to ask for some assistance from my wildlife specialist team. I've got Susan Spalding here with us, and Therese Glowacki also can assist with that in terms of the details. One of the things that we proposed in terms of changes is to help clarify, you know, as you saw in the slide with the various options, our intent is not to remove the prairie dogs, or we'd be looking at elimination of the prairie dogs, right? Complete removal. So we work to clarify some of those, some of that methodology and how we'll be going, what our approach is. So I'll let Therese take that away, I suppose. That first question.
Yeah, well, I'll start and then Susan can pipe in as well. So yes, we will definitely consider the impact, like looking at how many actual prairie dogs we have out there, how many acres are occupied with prairie dogs in that vicinity, and even in the broader area, because all of that is important when considering raptor health. Susan, you want to add anything to that?
I think that's a good point. We're going to research pretty carefully, you know, our methods and impacts on raptors in the area. So we're being very careful and looking into that.
Okay, thank you. Second question. Will any thinning that occurs be based on findings of at least the initial part of the methodology?
Right. So again, Susan Spalding, Wildlife Program Supervisor. So as we say in the plan, this is new to us, new territory. The idea of thinning, we need to approach it carefully. We need to look at all the current research. We understand that if we do too much thinning, we could collapse the social structure, but we also need to accomplish our grassland restoration objectives. So I fully plan to work with local experts and glean as much information as I can from their experience and our own, and try to come up with something that makes sense and is realistic and preserves both grasslands and prairie dogs.
Okay.
And I'll just add that we do have a very large habitat conservation area down there, and that is, in a sense, if we're removing prairie dogs from the MOA, we still have the HCA. So all of that's going to be considered when we talk about whatever we will do on the MOA.
Okay, final question then. Will the methodology be presented to POSAC and the public for review before implementation? I mean, this is such an important topic because, you know, we saw from the number of comments, and I think that the methodology is a good response to the public concern. So will that methodology be subject to review?
Yeah, I think we can engage stakeholders and get some input on the methods that we come up with, definitely. We also have other avenues for input, like the Prairie Dog stakeholder meeting, which we have annually. So that's coming in January. So yeah, I think this can be a topic of conversation going into the future, yes.
Okay, so thank you both very much.
Any other questions from POSAC?
I have a couple questions, if I could.
Okay.
This is Paula Fitzgerald. That was helpful to hear Trace's questions and your answers on those. I wasn't able to really find where the, I guess it's a potential bald eagle's nest site is located. Is it down near the Cradleboard Trail or is it up by Stearns Lake?
This is Susan again. So it's near Stearns Lake. We've had, so as Marty mentioned, they established territory in 2012, and they were located much farther west and north. And then they moved last year to a location on Rock Creek Farm, which now they've moved again closer to Stearns Lake. So they're definitely territorial. They're just choosing different alternate nests.
So I guess the question is with Field 7 and relocating, if you can go on, I mean, I believe what I've gathered from my review, that removing the prairie dogs from Field 7, you'll be able to aggregate the cropland, the irrigated cropland areas, have less buffer that you're having to manage, less perimeter of prairie dog area to manage. Which all makes sense, but you know, proximity to the bald eagle nest seemed to be one of the big concerns in the public comments, which I kind of agree is pretty important. And just from a wildlife perspective, are we getting too far away from that potential nest site if we do remove them there? And then, you know, it doesn't sound like you're removing and relocating within the property. You're just removing them and letting the existing populations down in the habitat conservation area thrive a little more readily. Is that correct?
Right. So we're trying to consolidate habitat in the southern portion of the property. We feel that the eagles can forage in the consolidated habitat area. We don't see a lot of evidence of them foraging in the 40-acre. That's not to say they don't, but we feel confident that we'll have enough prairie dogs for these guys. They also utilize fish out of Stearns Lake, so they have multiple prey sources. So we feel confident they'll be okay, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just to clarify for me, if I remember correctly, and I'm not saying that this is the way it would be done, but is it not the adjacent neighbor's responsibility to fence out prairie dogs rather than the owner of the property who has the prairie dogs to fence them in? I mean, I understand also one of the Parks and Open Space objective is to be a good neighbor.
I think you just hit it on the head. It's not the same as, say, a cattle operation where you are required to fence them out. We've wrangled with this for years, right? We want to be good neighbors. We oftentimes will like cost share the fencing, or they buy the materials, we install. So we plan to work closely with Broomfield on our proposals here with barrier fencing. But yeah, it's a great question.
Great. And let's see. Oh, yeah. So the other question I had was related to the trailhead relocate, or the new trailhead. And it seems like there's some significant public concern about having a new trailhead further down to the south end of 104th or on Brainerd. and, just activities at night, after hours, et cetera. And I wonder if that has been thought through. Is it better to have one site that's a little more central and not so out of the surveillance area? If you considered that.
I'd say one of Susan, I'll let you go in just a minute. One of the desires is to is to provide more parking, in that existing Stearns Lake trailhead just doesn't have the capacity to do that. And the existing parking down at Brainerd, it's not an existing lot, but it's used as a de facto one, and the demand is there. People are using it. I don't know if one of our resource, if Bevan wants to speak a little bit more about the desire to ensure that we have those access points, or what that would mean for your team. Bevan.
Yeah, Paula, all of our trailheads are patrolled at night by the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, and then in that area off Brainerd, that'd also be part of Broomfield. So we're pretty confident that if we build trailheads in either of those locations, they'll be patrolled. Right now, we have pretty good neighbors that report anything that happens down there at Stearns Lake, and then again over off of Brainerd. So I'm not concerned about security issues. I'm more concerned about public safety issues with people parking on the side of the road, or the amount of traffic that we're seeing parked at the bottom of South 104th when parking's full at Stearns Lake. So I think we'll be good, and we'll just make sure that those are patrolled.
Good. And then my last question, and thank you for that, because it kind of relates, is this relocated trail that Marnie just talked about during, I think it was the Burrowing Owl closure times. That would that be on 104th or adjacent to 104th? And just the safety aspect of that, if you're combining bicycle walkers with what seems to be, and probably will be over the future years, growing interest and growing traffic.
Yeah, part of the extension of the 104th Trail, which will actually go north into Louisville, and then, of course, dead end south there at the cul-de-sac. We will be looking at that as potentially a new trail corridor, so some kind of bike pedestrian lane on the side of 104th. We've already considered that over the last 2 years with the detour we've had in there. So as we go to improve that parking, and then as we add the South 104th Trail up to Louisville, that will be looked at.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from POSAC?
Jen, I have a question for you. Do you want POSAC members to just ask questions or comments on the plan as well? Is there?
This is sort of the question period for the presenters. And then once there's a motion and a second, that's when we'll have discussion on the motion. So.
Okay. Let me make a few quick comments and ask a couple questions if I could. Marnie, I really appreciate how difficult this property is and how complex it is. It struck me that you're trying to balance so many different uses, in part historically, right? This property was ag and it was critical habitat. There was oil and gas, there's riparian, there's grazing. Like when I worked for the Forest Service, it reminds me of what we used to call the forest lands, which was the land of multiple abuses, because you're spreading dissatisfaction somewhat equally here. And I think what struck me in this plan a bit is it's changed a lot over 40 years. It's now an island surrounded by development. And what I'm not quite seeing is the priority of what you really want to get done on this property and where it's headed. So I appreciate the vision, but the vision to me is not dissimilar from the vision for all of open space lands. It's like we want to do everything. And I'm not sure that's possible now and going into the future. So with that, I just want to ask you guys a couple questions around this. I appreciate that you need to do something different around prairie dog management. And I think thinning is a reasonable strategy to try, but I also think it's going to be really difficult. And I think it's going to be difficult not only trying not to disrupt the social structure, but to just have that long-term commitment to doing it well. Because a bit of what I read in the plan were things that have just fallen off the radar screen of parks and open space, probably for lots of good reasons, be it lack of money or lack of staff. But when I saw some of the habitat problems in riparian areas, gates that weren't closed, fences that are down, I worry that we won't have the long-term commitment to really do the thinning well. So I just want to make that as a statement. I know you guys will do your best, and I think it's worth changing the strategy to try the thinning, but I think it's going to be really challenging. Riparian health, I have more questions about. The attention to the active management has waned over the years and ongoing monitoring is limited. These are the words out of the plan. Gates are left open, often left open. Some fencing is down, not effective. There's not an adequate plan in place to assess maintenance, ensure gates are closed, to control livestock access. High tensile fencing recommended in the plan has proven to be ineffective. Additional grazing pressures cause damage, bank erosion. A diverse suite of riparian shrubs is suffering with little to no reproduction where grazing is present. Cottonwood trees of all age classes continue to die. What I'm trying to figure out is if the stated priority for riparian corridors is preserving wildlife habitat and plant communities, this from the plan, then what in that recommendation suggests that grazing in riparian areas is going to preserve wildlife habitat and plant communities? Like, I'm having a hard time understanding how you will achieve that goal. Jeff, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want me to talk a little bit, Marnie?
Sure, whoever.
Go for it.
And then Rob, if Rob is still on the line, he can chat too.
I also we've got David who's just turned his camera on too. He's our plant ecologist, and we've got a few more folks that are coming on as part of the team. As I said, an interdisciplinary team. It is a complex property with a lot going on and trying to better balance that. I do want to say that our ag tenant has been in place for over 20 years. Our birds of prey have been there since the 80s. You got to think a little bit back to what this department has, how we've evolved over that time as well. The last plan in 2002 was one that focused on some of these things. One of the topics that is part of the 13 includes standard operating procedures. There's a lot that we've done because of either the relationships or just, hey, we've worked through things. We're now kind of suggesting and moving toward formalizing some of that information so that we've got a document to be able to say, this is how we want to do things, including working collaboratively, both internally and with the ag tenant and with the birds of prey. Like, for instance, with the ag tenant on the prescriptive grazing, ensuring that that we're all on the same page for that. And then I'll let Jeff speak.
Yeah, I might just start, Member Lewis. I appreciate your initial comment where you said, where you were referring to some of the federal land agencies and the challenges associated with trying to juggle the land of many uses, or as you mentioned, abuses. And I think one of the things that I like to point out to people is that, well, first off, I think our federal land agencies do a great job, but they're really challenged. And when I've been able to have the opportunity to work with them, I noticed this as well. So for example, in Boulder, the Boulder Ranger District, I think, is something around the order of over 100,000 acres. They have around, I'm going to say, it used to be around 22 staff to cover that 100 and some thousand acres of land. Our department is now a staff of over 140 staff for less than, well, that we directly manage is just a little over 60,000 acres. And so whereas there's lots of places in the federal public land kind of matrix where it is hard to have as many people keep track of what's going on various parcels of land, I would submit that we are a little different. We have more staff. We are able to kind of keep track of things better and manage the properties. You know, I would say successfully. So in this instance, I think at Rock Creek Farm, yes, we have some challenges here and there, but as Marnie has shown, I think we can. I know we can. We've done it for 20 years. I think we can do a really good job of balancing these uses. So I just wanted to offer that kind of slightly different, or just respond to that your initial thing, which can be a challenge for public land agencies. So
yeah, and I appreciate that, Jeff. I think it's less for me about is it a federal agency or a county agency, right? And more about you have an island of land.
Yes.
It has a lot of different uses.
Yes.
From recreation to riparian to grazing to ag, birding, fishing, bikes, hikers, burrowing owls, prairie dogs. Like there are so many competing interests. At some point in time, we're going to actually have to make the hard decision about which have priority. And when there isn't a priority and they're all equal, then it becomes the art of spreading dissatisfaction equally. It's hard.
Yeah, I would just say that on this property, you're going to hear from people who really disagree with, or that might disagree with how we do it. I really feel like we cut a good balance here, and all in all, when you go out to the property, you see a lot of happy people. We've been able to keep a tenant there for over 20 years. I think that's a measure of some success. So I think what you can, I think if you're on the property, you see that, yes, it's gotten busier. There's more people out there, but those people are still enjoying things. We've in the last 20 years.
Absolutely. I was there yesterday.
And we've gained bald eagles. And we've still managed to do the agriculture on the property in the last 20 years. And I think what you're seeing with this management plan update is our attempt to kind of get at some of those things that to try and create some of these alternative trails so that we can continue to have recreation, but also still have viable wildlife. So anyway,
I appreciate that.
Great points. Very great points. David or Rob, do you guys want to talk a little bit about riparian health and grazing?
Yeah, I'll start out a little bit. David and I both, I think we're kind of on board about what we need to do, and it's I think our goals are very achievable. I think it's a matter of devoting some more attention to the grazing management of the riparian areas. Supporting the tenant a little bit more in providing the fencing and that's needed. We've done a lot of fencing of riparian areas in the past. We need to provide a little more fencing, some maintenance of that fencing, but we need to. I think the primary thing is coordinating more closely with the tenant, and again, providing a little more attention on our part in working with the tenant to manage the grazing in those riparian areas. And a lot of that is excluding grazing for most of the time, maybe for long periods of time, maybe for years. Other areas can sustain some grazing, but it needs to be managed closely. And so I think it's very achievable. We just need to provide the attention we need to coordinate with the tenant to do that. One of the issues is providing livestock water outside of the riparian areas. Mm-hmm. And so we have recognized that, and we've provided in the plan to explore and develop those off-stream livestock water resources, and that'll help a lot. David, I don't add on to that. Correct me.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing, especially about the livestock watering. I think, you know, some of these riparian pastures aren't just the willows and the cottonwood trees. Some of them include a fair bit of pasture grass, you know, smooth brome or other non-native pasture grasses that have been grazed in the past and, you know, benefit from grazing. There's no harm done to those. And I think the ability to manage this grazing really depends, you know, if we have a field that we can just put them in there for a limited amount of time, maybe they're in there in the dormant season, maybe, you know, for a few weeks here and there. That's one thing I think our problem we run into is some of these areas are the only access for water. So the cattle might utilize one riparian pasture from multiple different neighboring fields to get their water. So getting a handle on how that happens and how the tenant operates down there, working with the tenant to better manage that and improve these watering, I think will go a long way. I'd also say that, you know, not all the issues of the negative issues with riparian health are grazing. You know, we also have a lot of problems with the stream itself, with the increased water that we see now. You know, these used to be like intermittent streams, both Buffalo Gulch and Rock Creek. And now they just run year round, you know, with high flows, especially after storms. So there's a lot more down cutting, a lot more incision in those streams. And we've done a lot of work in the past to some restoration projects to improve that and to arrest that incision. But that's negatively impacted the riparian habitat as well and the vegetation because it's dropped that water table. So there's multiple factors going on there too.
Great, thank you.
If I could,
yeah,
I wanted
ahead,
to
Susan.
address, I'm sorry, this is Susan. I wanted to address another thing you brought up, which is spot on, is that what we're proposing to do with prairie dogs is long-term. It's pretty intensive, it could be, and we recognize that. We've talked about it a lot internally. I think that this management plan process, you know, sort of ties us to this property, and we are committed to moving forward with those long-term ideas that we're coming up with. So it's going to be more staff attention for these long-term fixes, and you're exactly right that we acknowledge that it's going to be long haul.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate too, Marnie, you talking about clearly defining the roles and responsibilities for the Parks and Open Space staff and the tenants, because it feels like that's something that has maybe been lacking in the past, is clarity around the roles, clarity around the responsibilities. So I was thankful to see that in the plan and appreciate that. Last thought, comment, page 53, all new signs. I would love to push you guys a little bit to make sure those signs that we do are in Spanish as well as English. This is an opportunity if we're going to do new signage to do it right and just start moving down the road of helping all of our citizens access these lands. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
I'll just pipe in that that is our new standard, that we're putting all of our signs in Spanish and English. We've already started that on many other properties, and we will definitely do it down here. So thank you for that suggestion.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Teresa.
Okay, any more questions from POSAC? Okay.
I have one more if I could. I'm sorry, did I speak over somebody? Just the statement, and I forget what it's called at the beginning, but it's the cultural statement recognizing Native Americans and First Peoples. I really like that, but some of the public comment I had to agree with. It's one thing to put a statement, but it's another thing and more important to actually have dialogue and follow up with those the tribes and those peoples. And so just I guess a hope that there is actual coordination going on there and input.
Marnie, do you care if I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead, because you've been more involved in this, Jeff. I think that's great.
Okay. Thank you, Member Fitzgerald. You're exactly right. And we did get a comment on that. We spoke about it at the HPAB meeting as well. As Marty indicated, because of the rich cultural resources and history on this property, we felt it was important to take this first step. But absolutely, it's a first step. And if it is just a statement, that we are really missing the mark. We're really falling. That is not what we want to do, is just have a statement sitting there on this document. And to that end, the department is actually working on the development of a land acknowledgement for our entire department. And we're expecting that that's going to be probably a year-long process, and that it's not going to only result in a land acknowledgement statement for our department, but that it will also recognize that there's going to be some actions and process that we're going to need to do to kind of back up what the statement acknowledges and try and make some changes. And our department is actually making some changes in that regard. We've had some visits and site visits with tribal members. We also have a place up at Rabbit Mountain where there is some Native American ceremonial use of one of the properties. And so we are making some steps, but I couldn't agree more with you that having just a statement is not what we want to do. That's not going to be the finish line for us. It's just the beginning. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Great point.
Okay, great. So before we move on to the public, I just want to lay out a few ground rules. So each speaker is going to get 3 minutes. People who are pooled will get, 2 people will get 6 minutes, and then 4 people will get 10 minutes. 10 will be the most time that pooled people are going to get. For the virtual meetings, speaker may request to share their camera, so they can, in the chat function, if they're not sure how to do that, they can contact Nick and ask him, and he could guide them on how to do that. So when you are going to speak, please identify yourself with your name and your address, and you will be timed. And beyond that, I think we are ready to go into the public comments. So the first person or pooled group, let me pull this up, looks like to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, Theo Kuhn.
That's correct, Theo Kuhn, and Dana Bovey, Donna Bushing, and Charlotte Boujol have pooled their time for Theo for a total of 10 minutes. Theo, are you there?
Yep.
Great, and you said you wanted to share your screen?
Mm-hmm. I will do that now. Can everyone see that? Great. All right. So my name's Theo Kuhn. I live at 2815 West 42nd Avenue in Denver, Colorado. Before I begin, I just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide comment. I'm a staff member at Front Range Eagle Studies. We're a small nonprofit that studies bald and golden eagles year-round throughout the Northern Front Range. The Stearns bald eagles, the entire family is shown here in 2018. They moved into the preserve in 2019 after extensive human disturbance at their original nest site. So I'll begin with a plot depicting our observations of seasonal changes at 5 bald eagle nests, including Stearns at the bottom. The red box represents the time period within which Boulder County Parks and Open Space, as well as most other bird monitoring programs, regularly monitor bald eagle nests. As you can see, a significant portion of the year is left uncovered by these monitoring programs. Our staff and dedicated volunteers make quantitative observations multiple times per week for the entire year. And the recommendations that we'll be presenting are based on over 1,200 hours in the field, studying the Stearns eagles alone. I just want to make a quick note here on something that was said earlier. The Stearns eagles are definitely nesting near Stearns Lake this year. They've been nest building 35 days out of the last 2 months or so. So they've definitely locked in on that site as a place to nest this coming season. We're concerned that one of the proposed developments in the draft plan does not abide by CPW's buffers for bald eagle nests. As you can see in the map on the left, the proposed parking lot at the south end of 104th Street is less than a quarter mile from the nest in which the Stearns eagles hatched 2 chicks earlier this year. CPW's buffers exclude new surface occupancy, including parking lots, within a quarter mile of an active nest. Though these buffers are technically recommendations, Boulder County's own cropland policy prohibits new disturbance within the buffer of a protected species. We appreciate Ms. Glowacki's recent testimony in favor of half-mile bald eagle buffers during the COGCC rulemaking recently, and expect that this support for buffers will be applied to the Stearns nest as well. We did bring this nest buffer issue up with the parking lot at a previous meeting, and we're told that it would be addressed, but I saw no indication that this had been researched. So I just wanted to once again reiterate that this is within the quarter mile buffer. In addition to contradicting CPW's recommendations and Boulder County policy, building that parking lot at the proposed site would diminish the exceptional rural character and wildlife viewing opportunities that this area provides. Several other commenters, as you noted, have attested to the unusual diversity of raptors and other wildlife on offer at the south end of 104th Street, including the ferruginous hawk, Cooper's hawk, and eagles that are shown here. The best way to abide by the Parks and Open Space Goal C1 listed here is to leave this area and its rare characteristics intact, enriching the human experience of nature rather than diminishing it with yet another central hub for recreation. As you all know, the draft management plan proposes significant changes in the management of black-tailed prairie dogs, which are a keystone species. You can see the Stearns male bringing in a prairie dog to the nest right there. These proposed changes impose risks on all species that depend on prairie dogs. Our prey retrieval data demonstrates that prairie dogs, shown here in yellow, are the dominant source of prey for the Stearns eagles. You can see in blue that fish, while they do eat fish, it is actually a pretty small proportion, around 12% of identified prey retrievals. But at least as important as the type of prey that they're eating is where that prey is coming from. At least a quarter of total prey for the Stearns eagles comes from within half a mile of their nest, and that's a bare minimum statistic. They can't simply just hunt elsewhere, as this requires expending greater amounts of energy searching the ever-shrinking grassland that's outside of the preserve. So what's the proposed plan for prairie dogs within the preserve? Here we see prairie dog management designations. In red is the no prairie dog zone. I won't go over this too much because it's already been discussed plenty so far. But within the critical half-mile buffer around the nest, almost 3/4 of the land is designated as no prairie dog. In the absence of prairie dogs in the majority of the preserve, populations must remain robust in the rest of the property, which is designated as habitat conservation and mixed objective areas, or HCAs and MOAs. But the draft management plan proposes thinning populations across almost all of the preserve's remaining colonies. And I should note, it proposes thinning in the HCA as well. Most troubling of all, staff have refused to set any upper limit on capture within HCAs and MOAs within the management plan, allowing for almost complete removal of populations in these areas if staff decides that's the best course of action. The absence of any concrete restrictions is unacceptable. How can we be asked to simply trust verbal assurances that staff will preserve sufficient populations? The draft plan's language underscores that the planned population thinning is experimental, and as stated in the plan, quote, one in which staff has little experience with. The nesting eagles and other raptors that depend on these prairie dogs are at risk in this experiment. As conservationists, we support the end goals of grassland restoration, but it's essential that measures are put in place to ensure that prey resources for federally protected eagles and other raptors will not be casualties of the enthusiastic pursuit of this goal. The Holmberg management plan itself must include maximum take numbers, This is an urgent issue that should be addressed now rather than at a future update to county prairie dog policy, as has been suggested by staff. I wanted to thank Tony, Trace, and Paula for bringing that up and for mentioning the formalized methodology that was mentioned in order to, prevent side effects of prairie dog thinning. And I just want to say that it's essential that that formalized methodology is released before the plan is adopted, and that it, address bald eagle prey and other raptor prey, because as Paula noted, the formalized methodology does not make any mention of the potential effects on these eagles that depend on that as prey. So again, that formalized methodology should be released before the plan is adopted. In the past, staff have cited past eagle nest success on or near open space lands as rationale for a policy at Holmberg that allows for near total removal prairie dogs from MOA parcels. But there's no evidence that near complete removal has occurred near any of the nests that they have cited. So the success of these nests has no bearing on the likelihood of success within Holmberg. Boulder County's cropland policy specifically states that its agricultural tenants shall abide by all federal and state laws governing wildlife. The relevant federal law here is the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, which states that it is unlawful to disturb bald eagles to a degree that causes or likely causes injury by substantially interfering with normal feeding, foraging, or sheltering behavior based on the best available scientific data. The best available scientific data shows that near nest prairie dogs are such a significant food source for the Stearns eagles that anything but minor removal on nearby MOA and HCA lands will, quote, significantly interfere with normal feeding. This would be a violation of federal law under the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, regardless of whether federal and state authorities show any interest in prosecuting such a violation. An allowance of near total prairie dog removal on Holmberg's MOA and HCA land cannot stand. A scientifically sound limit on prairie dog take must be established within the management plan, not at some time down the road, but within the management plan before it is adopted. Don't really have time to address this too much. One thing I want to say on the trails is that the proposed trail along the railroad grade, well, it's good that Field 65 is being redesignated to rangeland for burrowing owl habitat. It doesn't really make sense to designate that as burrowing owl habitat and then immediately run a trail through it. And also that trail doesn't improve connectivity because trail users could go along the north property boundary to Brainerd Road, as they've done in the past when the southern portion of the trail is closed. So it's an unnecessary trail and reduces habitat. So the management plan must go further in protecting bald eagles and other raptors before being finalized. A site-specific plan for state species of special concern is required by the cropland policy. Such a plan would ensure that the risks I've discussed would be mitigated. I just want to finish by saying that the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan and cropland policy, which I repeatedly cited, they were adopted on behalf of county stakeholders and by county stakeholders. And the mandates that appear in these plans, we rely on POSAC and elected commissioners to ensure that they are upheld. So I'm asking you as POSAC commissioners to please ensure that these mandates are upheld in this management plan.
Thank you, Theo.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, I believe we have Lindsay Sterling Crank.
Ruby and Chris Boardman, I believe Ruby has called in. Ruby, if you dial *6, you should be able to unmute yourself. Ruby, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All
And
right.
my husband's here also.
Okay, so
Hi, my name.
Sorry, you have 6 minutes if you're sharing time.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive, Longmont, In 2015, Boulder County Parks and Open Space submitted scoping comments to FEMA and the City of Longmont for the Resilient St. Vrain project. In its letter, the department stressed the importance of riparian areas. That is, riparian areas support greater numbers of species than other habitat types, greater than 90% of regional biodiversity, while they comprise less than 2% of land cover in Colorado's Front Range. I am perplexed as to why Parks and Open Space doesn't take better care of riparian areas at Carolyn Holmberg Preserve if these areas are so vital to native wildlife and aquatic species. Water sampling and monitoring conducted in Rock Creek outside of Carolyn Holmberg Preserve have shown low levels of dissolved oxygen that do not meet stream standards. Rock Creek is also on a state monitoring and evaluation list to determine impairment for E. coli. You can find this information in water quality analysis reports for the Keep It Clean partnership. In July of 2017, Parks and Open Space did a water sampling at Carolyn Holmberg, and the results showed E. coli colonies too numerous to count. Parks and Open Space know they may have a problem. On page 21 of the draft plan, water quality concerns were raised. Quote, over the last decade, there has been a noticeable die-off of Plains cottonwood trees throughout the property. The mortality is not limited to old trees, but affects trees of all age classes, which raises concern that there may be a water quality issue, unquote. Parks and Open Space should join the Keep It Clean partnership and conduct regular water sampling and monitoring of Rock Creek and share its data with the team at Boulder County Environmental Health and with county municipalities. I am also concerned by what I read on page 48 of the draft plan regarding riparian health. Riparian areas are being used for cattle grazing, that grazing more than is desired or sustainable. Gates are being left open. Fencing is down or not effective. Livestock grazing has caused damage to plantings and caused bank erosion. Riparian shrubs are suffering, including willows being eaten by livestock. Fencing off riparian areas is not the answer. Fences fragment habitat and wildlife movement along the corridor. I believe the solution is to ban cattle from riparian areas permanently. Cattle access to water should be from a livestock water trough, not from Rock Creek. It is important for Boulder County to heed its advice it gives to others about the importance of these ecologically sensitive areas. The other day, my husband and I visited the Carolyn Holmberg Preserve, and we were fortunate to catch a glimpse of the resident bald eagles. One was perched in the nest tree. The other eagle was in a nearby tree eating prey it caught, probably a prairie dog. Eagles are magnificent creatures, and we should not take them for granted. We should accommodate their needs in every way. And that's why I believe it's important for Parks and Open Space to develop a site-specific bald eagle managed plan to ensure these eagles have access to as many prairie dogs as they need to raise their young and to survive. Please limit the prairie dog take on MOAs in the draft plan. Finally, I don't support any more new trails or trailheads in riparian areas of Rock Creek and Buffalo Gulch, nor in HCAs. Please delete any of that from the plan. Thank you for providing this opportunity to give my input. I also submitted several comments online. I hope you were able to read them. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so are we ready for Lindsay now?
Hi. I'm a little unprepared, but I know this property well, and I'm very familiar with Boulder County's work. And I'm a local, my name is Lindsay Sterling Crank. I'm an environmental scientist, and I am the director for prairie dog conflict resolution for the Humane Society of the United States. And I've had the wonderful pleasure of dealing with this greatly underserved species and all the people that have a stake in this issue for 20 years now. So I'm aging myself. But the first thing I want to say after all of this is that thinning prairie dogs doesn't work. Kind of a buzzkill here, but Dr. John Hoagland, who wrote this book, and he wrote this book, and they're all thick, and some of them are just complete literature compilations, talks all about, here's his quote, here's what he said to me specifically about this issue. Several studies have demonstrated that black-tailed prairie dogs survive better and have higher reproductive success following reduction in colony size for natural and unnatural reasons. Consequently, thinning of prairie dogs is often short-lived because in most cases, populations quickly rebound. So that's just a little bit precedent setting. What I do to reduce conflict in all of these areas is really focus on how can we manage for prairie dogs in areas where they are designated and keep the conflict at bay by planning in advance, preventing conflict in advance, and keeping prairie dogs and excluding prairie dogs for areas where they are not desired. So that's my biggest critique and recommendation for what you guys are looking at. I really appreciate that Boulder County prairie dog management goals are to be balanced. And I'm so sorry, I really love Therese, but you guys are really out of balance. You have 15% of your HCAs. You have 85% in MOUs and non-prairie dog areas. Most of your holdings are non-prairie dog areas. Not only that, but the areas where you are managing for prairie dogs and you're trying to keep them and implementing plague management, it's not even working. You had like a 70 or 80% die off of your prairie dog conservation areas where you're implementing plague management for occupation of prairie dogs on your habitat conservation areas. Totally out of balance. You're not doing well in your conservation and you're not doing well with your non-lethal management. So I get that being decision-making is super hard. I really do. I see you guys and I respect all of you and all of your experience. And I think that sometimes it takes being a little risky and being a little bit of a leader too. And sometimes that means making an effort, a decision that's not popular. With that in mind, I would like to recommend that we amp up the efforts for the tenant to live with this colony. I really understand that prairie dogs can be a hard species to live with,
Lindsay,
but one that we have to learn to live
I'm
with.
sorry.
And that we use a regenerative agriculture approach and utilize the prairie dogs ecosystem services with agriculture.
Thank you. Okay, Nick, do we have anyone else? Okay, great, thank you. So next thing we're going to have is a POSAC motion and discussion. And then I just wanted to give you a heads up that after this topic, I am going to put us in a 5-minute break to allow POSAC members to get a drink, use the restroom, whatever, and then we'll come back for the final issue on the agenda. So do I have a motion from POSAC? It can be a motion.
I would make a motion, but it's going to be very vague without discussion. I guess I would move that.
Oh, no, we will have discussion.
Well, okay, so I would move that we basically approve the plan, but I'm going to ask for some refinements in it based on some of the comments I've heard here. So without that, getting too lengthy here, I think it's going to be hard to make a motion that's very specific.
Trace
what do you
Baker.
recommend?
Trace Baker, I will second Paula's specific comment there.
That wasn't actually a motion that could be seconded.
I know, it's kind of vague.
I need a
Do you see
motion.
do you see what I'm struggling with, Jen?
I do see what you're struggling with, but we can't actually vote on anything unless it's succinctly presented. So
Is it possible, Paula, to say something to the effect of, I move that POSAC adopt the plan with several specific changes as noted in the discussion to follow?
Would that work, Jen?
no,
No.
because
Okay,
that's not going to.
I'm going to
What-
step into the breach in order to move this along. I'll move that we adopt the plan as presented by POSAC this evening. That's my motion.
Wait, as presented by the staff, you mean?
By the staff, I'm sorry.
And then we can amend that motion as we have our discussion. Is that correct?
I need a second now. And we will vote on it, either yay or nay. Now would be the time to make any amendment.
Okay.
But within the discussion, you can, give instruction that will be provided to the county commissioners on what your concerns are. They will hear all of this. They will see all of this. So they're not going to not know what our concerns are. But if you want it actually to be a motion, it should be a succinct and clear thing that can be voted on. And right now we have a motion on the floor from Steve that needs seconded. And if there's no second, then we will have to move on.
Right.
So no second. All right. Do I have a follow-up motion?
Okay, I will make an attempt to list my concerns in this motion. So I would move that we accept the plan as presented by Boulder County staff with the following exceptions. One being that the trailhead is relocated outside of the quarter-mile buffer zone to the current bald eagle nest that they're currently trying to occupy. Second, that we look for I like the idea of relocating field 7 out of the ag area just for efficiency, but that we find an area along the border near an MOA or HCA area for that relocation spot so that we can aggregate that and actually push it closer to the nesting tree. And that we also, and the third and final one is that we put a maximum take on the prairie dogs within the thinning or the management recommendations for the prairie dogs.
Is there a second on that? Okay, so does anyone have a motion that will even get seconded?
Third time's a charm.
Ann, is that a motion?
Huh.
I don't think I have a motion. I think, Jen, what I'm trying to resolve, and maybe it's not resolvable. I think there are several concerns, right? At least I'll speak for myself. I have several things I would love staff to go back and take a deeper look at and come back with a stronger, more detailed recommendation, be it for trailheads, parking lots, riparian areas. I'm not quite sure if there's a process and a way to do that. And so I'm just finding it difficult to make a motion that would accomplish what I think Paula is trying to do. And that maybe others have some similar issues or different issues. I think that's the give and take. I think that's a little hard right now.
Okay, so
I don't know if you have any recommendations or not.
Eric Lane, quick question for you. Is this slotted to go to the county commissioners next month?
Yeah, so the Board of County Commissioners are going to meet and have a public hearing calendared for, I want to say the 16th. It's 15th, 16th, 17th, it's in there. So they will need a recommendation from you tonight in order to stay on track with their calendar. And my 2 cents on sort of how to help you get there would be to say, go ahead and make a recommendation and get a second, discuss it. If there are friendly amendments that after your deliberation, and if you have more questions for staff, et cetera, you feel like if the proponent of that motion says, okay, I want to update it to include the following things, you could certainly do that. And it could get voted down. It doesn't have to stay if what you learn as a group is something modified from the original, if it's not modified or retracted, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. So how about we do this? How about we take our break right now, 5-minute break, get your water, get yourself organized, process what you might want to vote on, write it down, and then in 5 minutes, we'll have another attempt at a motion. Does that work for everyone?
That's good.
Okay. So 5 minutes, everyone, and then we'll try again. direction that I received from Conrad, we can actually have some discussion before a motion. And if we have questions about any of the things that we heard that we need to address to staff so that we can make a clearer motion, we can do that as well. So if anyone wants to start discussion now or ask question of staff, let me know.
I'd be happy to start. So yeah, as I mentioned before, there were three, actually I've thought of a fourth, main areas of concern, and I would love to hear from staff as to whether these are possible or the downside of those. One is the trailhead areas proposed within the 1/4 mile buffer of the bald eagles nest site, and moving that outside of that 1/4 mile buffer area is the first. And the second is if it's possible to select a new prairie dog burrowing owl preserve area along the southern border of the non-prairie dog area to improve proximity to the bald eagle nest and still obtain the objective of congregating the areas so that it's easier to manage. And third is, again, the maximum take on prairie dogs within the prairie dog management areas. And then the fourth that I just added is enhancing the protection of the riparian corridor and water quality by restricting livestock access.
Okay. Do you have any questions for staff on if any of these things could be done or?
Well, yeah,
feasibility?
so question is, feasibility, downsides. I'm guessing you've probably looked at some of this before, and if you have, why they've been taken off the table, or if it's something that possibly just didn't occur during your discussion.
Well, let me start off. This is Therese Glowacki, and let me start off just by answering your question about the burrowing owl preserve and removing that and locating it to an area adjacent to the edge of the property. What I would say is, Marnie, if you could pull up the map, that's basically what we are proposing to do. We are proposing to move that burrowing owl area and have the grassland area be on the southeast side of the property. So I don't know that putting it, I think it's the right place for it where we are proposing, because putting it at the bottom of an HCA is not where the burrowing owls have been nesting. The burrowing owls have been nesting along the Cradle Board Trail. So here we go. That's a good thing where you see field 55 and field 65 down to the southwest corner here. That's where the burrowing owls have been nesting, and that's where we are proposing to protect that habitat there for burrowing owls. And that is what I would consider on the edge of the property.
So can you use the cursor? There's two areas that are in black there with black outline. And I guess I'm not 100% sure where you're referring to.
And I don't think I have access to the cursor. Marnie, can you circle 65, 55? Can you just use your cursor to show where those are? There we go. Okay. So that's where we are proposing to enhance habitat for burrowing owls. That's where the burrowing owls have been nesting in the past.
Can I interject here a little bit too? This is Susan. So I just want to say that Teresa's right. The burrowing owls have been in there, but they've also been in the HCA south of the railroad tracks on several occasions through the history of the property. So let's be clear on that. There's still owls nesting also in that HCA area in field 42. So I just want to say in total, we've had 17 nests over 22 years at Rock Creek Farm. 11 of those nests have been where Therese was talking about, and then also south of the railroad track.
I think some of the concern from the public, as I understood it, was that we're moving the prairie dogs further away from the nest site. So,
okay. Yes, so we're not. And if you look at, okay, again, Marty, can you point where the former nest site was, where the, okay, I wish I had the cursor. The former nest site was off the property above far northwest corner, kind of where you see it says Burlington Northern, right in that area was one nest site. And then in 2018, it was over near Field 92.
It's 2019. Are we talking, wait a minute, I'm sorry, you guys. We're talking about bald eagles? I was just talking about burrowing owls. I apologize for
Now
that.
we're talking about bald eagles.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So the bald eagles have been near where the Burlington Northern is, that they've been near 92, and now they're on right about 25. So by moving the burrowing owl preserve from Field 7 down to Field 65, you are not really changing the distance a bald eagle would need to fly to get prey.
Okay, good.
Next, your riparian question. How about if we break down your 4 questions into 4?
That'd be great.
Okay, so the riparian. So your question is, are we going to have better protections? What we proposed in the plan is to limit grazing, enhance the fencing, and only have cattle in there basically during the dry season when it's not growing, when our plant ecologists give it a thumbs up and say, yes, it's safe to graze in here.
And Therese, and you feel like you guys can do that and manage that differently than it has been in the past according to the plan?
What I would say is we are going to give it our best try, and one of the best case scenarios is that Marnie, who has led this plan, is committed to working with this group to implement this over the next several years, which I think is our best chance of really having that happen. And so yes.
And we have the success, and we have the successful record of managing grazing in the northern part of the county for another threatened and endangered species.
I know, Jeff.
Pebbles meadow jumping mice.
But the hard part for me is to see in the plan, you guys call your own selves out in the plan saying, we couldn't do this. The fencing fell down, the gates are open, it wasn't working. So it just makes me want to say, can you write into the plan, if this isn't working in a year or two, that you would just ban grazing in the riparian areas until we can figure it out?
Yes, we could. We could write that into the plan, and I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think having milestones would be appropriate.
Well, and this is Rob Alexander with Ag Resources. And I want to say, you know, when we recognized that we didn't provide enough attention, that was upon reflection, looking back.
Sure.
Now we know that it takes, what we need to do is apply attention. I mean, we had the 2013 flood that took our attention away. We had many things taking our attention away. As part of the reason for the Rock Creek plan was that we recognized, hey, we need to bring our attention back here. And so I'm very confident without a lot of effort that we can accomplish what we need in those for the management of riparian areas. And I would say flat out excluding grazing from all the riparian areas is not a good thing. But we need to manage the grazing very closely, and it needs to be based on the riparian values, not on providing forage for the cattle, but based around achieving the riparian values. So I'm very confident that we can do that. I'm very confident that the tenant will be on board. It just really takes our attention. And the way we achieve that, Tony, is through a written operating plan with the tenant. And plant ecology, wildlife folks are all involved in that. And it becomes written in black and white what the grazing plan is. And frankly, for a lot of this, there's not that much riparian area in terms of acres. It's pretty small. We should be able to achieve that very, very well. It does take a little bit more infrastructure with a little bit more fencing and maintenance of fencing and developing livestock water. We can achieve whatever we need to for those riparian areas.
Yeah, and Tony, I would just weigh in and say, rather than viewing the admission that things haven't gone as well as we would like with skepticism, I would say the flip side is more true, in that admitting that we have not done as well as we would like in our management performance is something that we're okay admitting, because it's the truth, and we're not trying to like sweep stuff under the carpet and say, you know, we can do it all. We know some of this is very challenging. Managing prairie dogs is very challenging, and as Marnie pointed out at the top of the show, this property is very complicated, and it is trying to achieve a lot, and I think it has achieved a lot. But what staff have recognized as part of this management plan update is where we are not doing well and where we need to tune up our game and make a reinvestment both of staff time and commitment as well as resources. And I've certainly told the staff in numerous ways and numerous occasions that we need to get a plan put together that is acceptable to POSAC and acceptable to the board and the public. And then we need to invest in it. We need to follow through. And maybe we always haven't followed through as well as we should have upon the completion of a plan, and it's gathered some dust on the shelf. But I'm very much committed to making sure we make a sequenced set of investments that are cost effective and logical to implement this over the next several years. So I'm actually sort of pleased that as a department, as an organization, we're able to admit in a public document that this hasn't gone so well in all respects, and here's how we plan to improve upon it in the future.
It's a great point. I totally agree with that, Eric. I appreciate that perspective. And I'm not trying to hammer you guys. I just want to have some security in feeling like we're approving a plan you guys can get done and that you have the resources for. So appreciate that.
So going back, this is Paula Fitzgerald again. The other two things I'd like to hear from staff on is providing a new trailhead area outside of the quarter-mile buffer. I think that one is pretty obvious, that you can't put a new parking facility into a known nest site unless you're shutting it down most of the year, half the year.
So what I would say to that is that we will definitely work with CPW. I think that what we have seen is 3 different nests for the bald eagle in the past, over the past 5 years even. And that to strictly say we would never put it right there at 104th, again, this is going to take some planning. I think that I think it's going to take more planning before we know exactly where we would put it. We would not go against any CPW recommendations. And if CPW said, don't expand your parking lot and put one at that part of 104th, then we would look elsewhere. If the bald eagle were to leave and find a different nest and it was outside of that and 104th Street worked in the next, well, I also understand that bald eagle protections are protections for nests for up to 5 years. Even if they abandon that nest and they aren't nesting there, you still have those protections. I would say we will not put it within a quarter mile of an active nest.
Okay. So I think that probably does need to be said in the motion then, so that, because right now we're reflecting that, correct? And then the other thing, and Trace, you'd be the person on this, about the maximum take for prairie dogs within the prairie dog management areas.
In the multiple objective areas?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I may call on Susan to help answer this too. I'll start the ball rolling by saying we really don't know exactly how many prairie dogs we will need to remove. And I completely appreciate what Lindsay Sterling-Crank said. I think we need to do more research on how effective is thinning, what are some better mechanisms. As was pointed out earlier, we really are stuck between a rock and a hard place with prairie dog management on a confined space like Rock Creek Farm that has neighbors outside it, that has, active agriculture. Managing prairie dogs in Boulder County is a very complex issue. And we'll need to figure out exactly what that limit is. I don't think we would feel comfortable right now saying no more than 50% of prairie dogs would be removed from an MOA. It may be more, it may be less. Susan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that this is something we need to really research and look into in depth. I totally agree that we do not want to mess this up. So we also have a lot of great contacts out there who have a ton of expertise, a lot of research to review. If we decide there's different methodologies we want to use, like maybe removing colony, like coteries from the outskirts of the bigger colony, maybe it's not a blanket thinning, maybe it's taking out patches of prairie dogs, so coteries, or isolated colonies that are not connected to the bigger colonies. Something like that could work, and that would not collapse the social structure, which we are very aware of. And it would not, we are not going to remove all the prairie dogs from the HCA or the MOA. We recognize this area is super important for raptors. We totally get that. We know that the development in the surrounding areas, which has been acknowledged, we're losing prairie dogs out there. So yeah, we're aware of all of that, but we also know that we're losing our grasslands. And we don't see the lark buntings out there, and we don't see some of our meadowlarks at the same population numbers that we have in the past. So we need to acknowledge that as well. I think it's also been said, we're trying to do everything with very small acreage, and that is super complicated. So again, we know that, but we will try our very best to not disturb any of the raptors, not collapse the social structure of the prairie dogs. We're not going to remove 100% of the prairie dogs on the HCA or the MOA. We're going to host the burrowing owls. We're going to continue that. So that is our long-term goal, and we'll continuously be committed to it.
Is there some suggested language that you would have that would give the public some confidence? Because I agree, and I trust you guys, that I know you're trying to do the very best thing possible here. But I also understand the public's concern that since there's no threshold, there's no maximum take, you know, it kind of leaves it wide open. Can you come up with something that sounds like a reasonable and achievable balance there?
I think we can. It would have to be more related to the acreage of the colonies instead of the numbers. I think this is super complicated, but I think we could come up with some measure. But I want time to make sure we do it right. This is the catch. So.
Yeah, Paula, I think what I would suggest as a solution on this is perhaps in a motion, POSAC could identify this issue and ask staff to come up with some modified language so that when it goes to the board for consideration, we're making our next best stab at trying to resolve this issue to everyone's satisfaction. A little hard to do it on the fly in a public meeting. And since we don't know, since we haven't done the analysis and the consultations to figure out what the right number of prairie dogs befit the situation so that we can have a healthy grassland and a healthy prairie dog population, saying, well, there's an upper bound or a lower bound doesn't make any sense because we don't know what those numbers are. If we stick any number in it to say, well, we won't remove more than X number of prairie dogs, or we'll always maintain Y number of prairie dogs, that flies in the face of trying to do the analysis and do the consultation and try to provide the management solution that is based in science. And that's going to take a little bit of time. What we need to move away from, I think, is our past practice of allowing prairie dog populations to, in these sort of very bounded situations, grow to such population densities that they then crash the system, which means our only solution is to remove all of the prairie dogs, reseed it, hope for rain, try to get that grassland to be more resilient, and then let prairie dogs back out there. And we end up in this oscillation of boom and bust, which is not doing anybody any good, and I think is sort of a dereliction of duty when it comes to maintaining the grassland. So I think what we are trying to suggest, although not everybody thinks that we can or is a good idea, but what we're trying to suggest is we need to find a better way of doing that. We've called it thinning, and I look at it more as a more nuanced management of the prairie dog population than waiting for the bust to then go in and remove all the prairie dogs and then have it followed by a boom. So we can try to work on some of that language, and that might be a solution so that when we put this forward to the board, everybody can have a sort of second bite at the apple to see if that language better describes what we're trying to accomplish, and to see if there's better buy-in in what we're proposing.
So Paula, maybe in your motion, rather than trying to get too specific about all of these things that we don't know because the staff hasn't looked at them yet, maybe create a space in your motion that allows the staff to look at those things. So a bit of more generalized motion that gives them a broader window that covers the things that you're most concerned about without us actually trying to do the science in our motion.
Yeah, Trace Baker here. I'd like to follow up on what Eric was saying, is that he was talking about boom and bust for prairie dogs, which on this property would probably mean eagle populations moving in counterphase and booming and busting at this, in opposite directions. And I would certainly vote against any plan with the language that would have a specific number for maximum take or anything else you would do. But as I think as Theo was discussing, if we could have the plan commit to a study that would be reviewed before implementation, and I would add perhaps periodic review annually or every 2 years or something like that, that would be more appropriate language for a broad plan than a specific numerical goal.
I'm willing to take a stab at another motion unless somebody else has some.
I have one more question. I'm just curious to get some historic perspective on when looking at either increasing or adding parking, were there any parking capacity management practices that the team explored in lieu of more parking spaces?
Looking at different ways to have visitors come to the property?
Exactly, or reservation systems, or, I don't think paving over our space is going to be a long-term way to manage capacity at our open spaces. So I'm just curious. I mean, ski areas are doing it, freeways are doing it. Are there innovative ways to manage capacity without adding parking spaces, more parking?
One of the things that I did not delve into is that Carolyn Holmberg Preserve actually has a really high percentage of visitors coming to the property by bike and walking. Yes. Probably a higher, it's one of our highest, yes. Our parks that has the highest percentage of that already. And Jeff might be able to speak a little bit more about some of these new innovations that are starting to hit Boulder County and our partners in particular, like you said, the reservation system. We've got, I think there's probably a 15, not even, how many cars can park in that lot today? There aren't a lot of parking spaces, right, given the number of visitors that we have and the just the year-round visitation that we have. So the idea is to improve it based on the visitation today and the expectation of the visitation in the future. I think it's a reasonable expansion.
And I think one of the things too, if I could, Marnie, just add on, I think you nailed it. I think for that westernmost lot, that's actually a matter of safety, a bit of public safety issue. It's real muddy right now. And so we have people parking in sort of this widened shoulder area, and that's just not an ideal situation. And so there's a recognized need there for adding some parking spots and formalizing that area. But as Marnie said, I mean, this property, I guess I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I bet you its non-car visitation is among the highest in our entire system. It's on the Coal Creek, Rock Creek Regional Trail. We get a lot of people visiting the property, running or riding and hiking up the trail from Lafayette and Louisville. And then of course we get many, many people visiting the property from the south, from Broomfield. And then we're building a new trail connection along the entire length of 104th between Coal Creek and this property. And that also will certainly increase the number of non-vehicular or multimodal visits to the property. So just wanted to make sure that you knew that we've been, that this is a property that has a lot of multimodal visits, so.
Jeff, this is Paula again. Is that something that maybe staff could do more work on making publicly available, where other off-site parking areas, trailheads, how Carolyn Holmberg can be accessed from other established trailheads? I like Ann, I'd hate to see more open space paved over. I mean, another option is to look at hardening the edges of that roadway so that it's not as much of a safety issue, maybe widening in certain spots so you still have it kind of where it is now, but it's not as much of a safety concern. But I think first would be a little more publicity on, okay, you can half mile to the west of here, or wherever you can access it and easily get into the site.
Yeah, and we can certainly do that. One place that could be a good starting spot is the East Flatirons US 36 park and ride spot.
Perfect.
But the catch there is there's not, it's a road access, and so we would need to look with Broomfield at improving sidewalks and doing those kinds of things. So there might be other places, but we would need to also accompany some of these existing parking areas with some added infrastructure ourselves. So.
Okay. So I need to sort of cut off discussion at this point. It's already 9 o'clock. We've gone past our agenda and we've got one more actually heavy topic coming up. So I am going to request the best motion you can make thoughtfully and for people to vote on it. And you don't have to vote yes, you can vote no, but we need to get this done. So do I have a motion?
I'll give it my best shot. I would move to approve the updated management plan for Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm as drafted by county staff with the following modifications. One is deferral of a new trailhead until other options for off-site parking, or let's just leave it there, for other off-site parking can be explored. Two is to modify the prairie dog management objective to ensure a balanced and healthy, sustainable population. And that's it. Those are my exceptions.
Do we have a second? Come on, someone give me a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, discussion. Paula, you made the motion. Do you have any discussion about it?
No, I'm totally open to friendly amendments or whatever else. I know it's a difficult one, but I just want to move this along.
Okay, Steve, do you have any discussion? Okay, any other discussion from POSAC?
Trace Baker. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, the reason I'm just going to comment on my second is I think we need to move this forward in some fashion. I was the one who made the motion to just go with the plan as drafted by staff. And I do want to comment about parking spaces, that there's one of the objectives in the parking is to include equestrian parking, and I'm very much in support of that. And equestrian parking needs a little more room than parking on the sides of roads for everyone's safety. The third comment I'll make, and then I'll shut up, is I am not a fan of micromanaging these plans or the staff in executing the plans. I'm done.
Trace?
Okay, Trace Baker here. Paula, your amendment about managing for a healthy prairie dog population, we would have to balance prairie dogs, grassland health, and predator health. And I think sticking with prairie dogs is very too narrow, even for a sweeping plan like this.
Do you have some specific language you'd like to make as a friendly amendment to that?
Almost verbatim then to modify healthy prairie dogs to balance among prairie dogs, grassland, and predators.
Okay, so can you state that as a motion, please? And I'll need a second on it.
I think it was Paula's original motion, so I'll let her.
Well, you're doing the amendment though. You're amending the language.
Okay, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sure that I remember the entire amendment. So Paula, if you could restate and then I'll modify.
Okay, so I think the basic.
Or you can rescind your motion if Steve agrees to it, and you can start over.
I haven't heard any objections about anything else. So unless people are not supporting this motion for other reasons, then I think it's better to just work on these little refinements.
Okay.
So if I heard you right, Trace, that second point was that staff modify the prairie dog management objective to ensure a balanced and healthy, sustainable prairie dog population, grassland, and
I want to say predators because other things eat prairie dogs besides eagles.
Okay, and predator populations.
And that's exactly where I'm going. So good.
Okay.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor to amend the language of Paula's motion to include grassland and predator along with prairie dog. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment? No. Okay, so first we're going to vote on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to have to do a count because I can't tell. All right. I'm going to call names. Heather.
Aye.
Paula.
Aye.
Stephen.
Nay.
Trace.
Aye.
Anne.
Nay.
Tony.
Aye.
Okay, the amendment passes. Now we're going to vote on the motion as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Aye.
Okay, going to do a call again.
Okay.
Heather.
Aye.
Paula,
Aye.
Stephen,
Nay.
Trace,
Aye.
Anne,
Nay.
Tony.
Uh,
You can abstain.
yeah, I think I will.
You'll abstain?
Yep.
Okay. So the motion carries. Thank you,
Did
everybody.
you vote, Jen?
Oh, I voted yes. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for persevering on this one. And we've got another fun one coming up. So we're going to call to the floor Jeff on the.
Can I just ask, I'm not sure I got the full motion on that, and I don't know, just going back to Paula, the motion was to have modifications that were two. One was deferral of the new trailhead to explore offsite parking, and the second was modify to balance a sustainable prairie dog and predator population in grasslands.
Grasslands and predators.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Prairie dog, grassland, and predator.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So moving on, Jeff, you're up.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your patience. If you recall, at the last meeting, we discussed some changes to the land use map of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. At the end of the item in our discussion, staff and you all agreed that we should go back and take a look at some of the other areas that the public and other folks had raised as also needing some adjustments on the county land use map. So I have done that, and I'm going to share my screen and just go over those real quick. If this works here, let's see. Are you able to see this?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, good. So again, we took an opportunity to look at the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, the area inside the planning boundary, and I took it upon myself to look and see if there were some other areas in there that were raised by the public, and then other spots that I felt could also be adjusted in the land use map. And so what I'm going to show you are those places. So the next item here, let's see. So hopefully you're seeing a table, and this includes some of the properties that were mentioned by the public at the last meeting. And so you can see this listing here, the acreage of the properties, their current designation in the land use map, and then what their proposed designation would be in the land use map. So it includes the Twin Lakes properties. It includes the adjacent Willows property. It also includes some that weren't mentioned explicitly at the last meeting, Legion Park. And then there's a series of properties that we own south of Highway 52, south of Mineral, and then north of J that I felt would also be important to see and change in the land use map. So here's the listing, or here's sort of the map showing showing some of these properties. I haven't highlighted them in particular here, but I'm going to use my cursor. So it's these Churchill properties. This Churchill, this green means a joint purchase. This sort of pea green means an area where we just purchased development rights. So those are conservation easements. So you can see Johnson Trust, Cohen property, and then this Twin Lakes, Red Fox Hills, and Willows kind of complex. Another spot that I mentioned were some of the properties out here south of 52 west of 95th Street, in particular Washam and Axelson. So that's the location for those properties. And then finally, Legion Park. Legion Park is on Arapahoe Road, just west of 75th Street. So those are the changes that that I noticed that needed some updating now. And I have, hopefully we still have some city and county planning staff on the call that can help address any concerns or questions you might have. The planning staffs have noted that we can't ask that these changes be made to the land use map at this time. There's kind of a prescribed process for amending the land use map, and we've made and those changes are sort of working through the process. So while we can't make these changes in this midterm update that I just went through, what I'm suggesting is that you approve the recommendation that this list of properties be addressed at the time of the next major update or prior to it. If you need more explanation about why they can't be included in this midterm update, I might have one of the planning staff help do an explanation on that. And then the last thing that I wanted to just mention, just so you're aware of it, is that there are some other changes that are occurring that don't need your POSAC approval, but I just wanted you to be aware of them. And what they are some changes to the planning area boundary. In particular, if you look on this west edge of the town limits, this is the blue line. If you've heard about that in terms of City of Boulder planning. And there's 9 areas where I have one of them pulled up here on the left part of the slide, where the former blue line created a situation where there was an Area 2 designation for a parcel. This is in the Chautauqua area, actually. That now this has all been purchased for open space, and so what is being suggested, or what is being proposed, is that, for example, in this case, all of that would now be shown as Area 3. There wouldn't be any part of Area 2, which, in theory could be annexed. Again, the city owns this now, so there's in open space, and so they're making a series of 9 changes to this western blue line boundary, and city staff could detail that more if you'd like. I think, yeah, that's really my last slide. And so what we're asking from you tonight is that you recommend approval of the previous 592 acres that we looked at last time, and then a submittal of a list of these 12 additional open space changes, some of which were suggested by the public, some of which we discussed at our last meeting. And so I'm recommending that we forward that list on to the county's planning commission, the county board of county commissioners, and the 2 city boards. So with that, I think I'm done, and I can try and answer questions. And then we do have Jean Gatza from the city's planning department. It looks like she could answer some questions if you had them.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
You bet.
Questions from POSAC?
Yes, Ann Obenchain. I would like to understand why we can't make these updates now. And then I'd also like to understand when the next update would happen.
Thanks, Ann. I'm happy to answer that. And thank you to Jeff for doing the work to identify those. The purposes of the midterm update, and this one particularly was scoped to be very narrow in scope due to timing and resources. So the purposes of the midterm update are really to offer a public application process and make adjustments to the plan that for policies or map changes or other adopted plans that have been, I'm sorry, it's a little late, I'm a little tongue-tied, that have been adopted since the last major update. We had the last map updates in 2017. So what we had scoped originally for this update was to do some of these cleanups. Basically was the open space designations for properties that were acquired since 2017. And then also to complete some of these cleanups for the blue line. The blue line, as and Jeff explained it, is our western edge, above which we do not provide city water, below which properties are eligible to receive city services. And so the voters approved that blue line in 2016. And we had a number of other cleanups for open space properties. We also have some private properties where that will affect those folks' ability to annex. And so that was included in the scope of this update. We know and we recognize that there's quite a bit of other work to do to investigate and look at our full land use map, especially regarding some of the open space categories, and do a cleanup. Again, I appreciate Jeff's work getting that started. I probably, if we had identified these a little earlier, we would have wrapped them in. But at this point, with the process and with our staffing challenges, both through COVID and through some of the emergency response that's been needed lately, we just can't quite get this one in on this. We'd like to try to get this update through the city approval bodies by the end of this year and to the commissioners next year. And recognizing that I've already got a file tagged for work to be done to be addressed in our next major update. We anticipate that to be 2025 for the major update. However, we recognize that there's a lot of this analysis and work to be done, so that we think we can get started on some of that in preparation before that update. I think I forgot something.
Nope, that's it. Thank you. You did great.
Any other questions for
Yeah,
Jeff or Jean?
I have a question. This is Paula Fitzgerald. Probably most for Jean. Well, actually, I'm not sure. Maybe Jeff. So we have this updated plan, but the map's not 100% accurate. My concern is that these properties are secured in their status so that no development can come in. Nobody can come in and say, okay, well, it's showing this on the map, even though it's not. So I can propose a development or whatever. Is it going to be safe in that regard in this holding pattern?
That was the other thing that I was going to say, was that because these properties are controlled by, owned and controlled by the city and county, I think it's just the county ones that we're referring to, and managed. It's not, there's no decision making that's going to be happening that would be affected by these maps.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay. So now we move on to the public comments. Again, I'll remind people that there's 3 minutes for each. 4 speakers or more will be limited to 10 minutes. And that's pretty much it. Nick, do we have anyone in waiting?
Hello, this is Donna. I'm not very tech savvy. I didn't realize sharing the screen would be the computer. I just have some papers to show, so you just have to see me.
Real quick, Donna, your full name and your address, please.
Oh, okay. And do you need, my husband's in the other room. Do you need him for the?
Well, if he's sharing his time with you, then
Yeah.
it's just you.
No, he's there.
Right, but you're the,
But do you need him to come
no,
here?
no, I just need you. He's sharing his
Okay.
time with you, so you're
Yeah,
the
he
main
is.
person
Okay.
speaking.
Sorry. Okay. So do I start the video then?
State your full name and address, please.
Okay. Donna George, 4661 Tally Ho Court.
Great, and now you can start your video.
Oh, you have me on anyways. Okay. Hi, yeah, I just want to thank POSAC for bringing this up. I actually put in a request, which is why I don't quite understand why these can't be done during this update. There was another thing for another property somewhere here in Gun Barrel, and they didn't even go through the process, and they're taking that on through this thing to possibly change that land use. And these are like clerical things that's pretty obvious. I don't understand quite why we're not doing it now. But I do appreciate that you're at least moving this forward, and it's starting to go through. And I understand with COVID, there's a lot going on. These POSAC, these are just some of the land. I think we really should talk to other citizens to see in their area other discrepancies in the map. And I also put in for not just discrepancies for POSAC, but discrepancies for parks, discrepancies for other land things. For instance, I have one here. This is a part of it. Can you see that? It's by Twin Lakes, and it says it's actually open space acquired, but it is actually owned by the Brandon Creek Homeowners Association. So there's some other cleanup that needs to be done that we need to move forward. And I actually requested, I talked to both Chris Meschek and Eric Lane at the 2015 update, talking about these discrepancies. And now we're 5 years old later. I put in a request, and now they want to put this down the road another 5 years for basically what's clerical errors. I don't understand, but again, I'm glad you're at least moving it forward. Jeff, thank you for going through that. You've gotten a lot of them that concerned me. I do want to mention that there are some things, for instance, can you see that? Hopefully you can see that. Sorry. The park, the Red Fox Hill one is actually now designated as park, urban, and other. It's not designated as open space other as you have.
That's right.
So it would go from park, urban, and other to open space acquired. The other thing, and you showed some of this on your map, hopefully you guys can see this. This is by Sombrero Ranch, and you can see the city-owned properties are open space acquired, but the county properties that have been purchased are, again, a park, urban, and other, and an open space other. Mm-hmm. So those also have to be added. So I appreciate your list. You've gone through a lot of them that I would have covered. I believe there's some others that we really need to look into, because I do think it's important that the map is as accurate as possible. I understand we're in COVID. I understand there's a lot going on. I still don't understand the delay, but we're moving in the right direction. I am thankful that, Paula, you asked the question that nothing can be done with these lands, that they are protected, even though on the map you don't have them designated as open space acquired, which means that you cannot annex through them either. It's a state law that you cannot annex through county open space. So this is the thing that I want to make sure that these are, the map's accurate, not just for this, for other properties, which I'll have to, I guess, go through the board, the county board, because there's other properties that won't affect, POSAC. It's not affecting open space, but there are other properties. So thank you again. I appreciate a lot of your backdrops, the chickens, the wild turkeys, the hallway with the chandeliers. It was pretty cool. It's because I did listen to the previous talk too. So thanks again. And yes, please Eric, if you're still on, we can start tomorrow. We can start getting this thing to go. I've asked 5 years ago. I want to make sure that this is as accurate as possible. So thanks again, POSAC, for bringing this up. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Is there anyone else to speak? Okay, great. Do we have any questions for staff to clarify public statements or any other concerns before I ask for a motion?
I have just one, Paula Fitzgerald, and this is for Jeff. Jeff, is there a way that you could put out sort of a call for any other things like this out here? She had a list of a couple of other properties that are still not in this sort of cleanup thing, but well in advance of 5 years from now, to put a call out. We have some very attentive landowners who are quite concerned about this, and it'd be really nice if 5 years from now this results in a map that's 100% complete and updated. And I get it, it's hard to do, but
I think that yes, it is getting late for me too. Sorry, but yes, I think that we can look at doing that, and Jean or Hannah might have some thoughts about how we can be sure that we get a notification out there in time for people to react to and make suggestions in time for the major update. Would one of you want to comment about that briefly? Say what?
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay, thanks, Hannah.
Might help.
Hannah Hipley works is our long range manager in the community planning and permitting department, POSAC.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We can include sort of map scrubbing within the scope of the next major update.
For sure.
So that will allow us to look at the open space things, any other sort of cleanup items that might be out there. One of the things that happens with the BVCP is the scope of the update is agreed to at the beginning, collaboratively with the city and the county, and then we move forward and do the work. So part of the problem with sort of tacking on items at the end, we recognize they all need to be done, but they weren't agreed to it wasn't part of the agreed to scope of work. That scope of work is what we anticipate the public expects us to be working on. So to, again, add things at the end like this outside of what both our elected bodies and the general public expects us to be working on as part of any given update is just not normal practice. And a little bit, it would be unusual to sort of just add on items at the end that haven't been vetted by anybody and aren't anticipated by the general public.
I appreciate that, Hannah. And if I can just add, and Donna, we've talked about this too, and we totally agree that as Hannah said, a good scrubbing, a good analysis needs to occur on these. Very specifically, the midterm update is not the time for big work plan items. And we anticipate that this one would be a bit of a lift between city and county staff that as Hannah said, we did not have programmed to our work plan for this year.
So but at least Paula again here, just that it's pretty clear that number one on your scoping for 2025 is to do a map scrubbing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for clarity before I request a motion? Okay, can I please have a motion from POSAC?
Trace Baker, I move approval of the transaction as described by staff.
Do I have a second?
Heather Williams, I'll second.
Excellent. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Awesome. Motion carries. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Jean and Hannah,
Appreciate
thank
your
you.
discussion.
Okay, all right, moving on down the road. We've got Parks and Open Space Rules and Regulations revisions with Bevan.
Hey, thanks, Jen. This is
Bevan.
Bevan Carruthers, Resource Protection Supervisor. And I'm just going to move through these pretty quickly, but these are the revisions we're proposing to our rules and regulations. And I bring them forward now just because we've been terribly busy, and I'd like to get these moving along before we move into the new year and potentially even busier months to come. So I'll begin by sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see this. Oh. Great. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'll just quickly go kind of through our process. And we review the rules and regulations every 2 to 3 years. The last time we did this was in 2018. That's the notorious e-bike revisions that we did. And that took us about a year to get through. So we're coming back at you with some different changes. After we review the regulations, we run them through the sheriff's office, the county attorneys, of course, the open space director. And we bring them to all of you for feedback, revisions, and to provide approval to the county commissioners. In December, I'll meet with the county commissioners and recommend the final changes to the revised rules and regulations. Just some quick data, because I get asked quite often about how many tickets we write. So these are the top 5 tickets we wrote last year. Parking after hours. So those are people in the parks in the evenings and first thing in the morning before the sunrise or sunset. Dogs off leash, closures, and fishing violations. In 2019, we issued 669 citations. So besides 2017, when we issued 820, that's pretty much on par. And I would assume we'll be somewhere pretty close again this year. One of the big changes that we wanted to make to our rules and regulations is an increase in fines. So these fines haven't been increased probably in 4 to 5 years. State law allows us to have a fine up to $300. And when I review these, I look at the surrounding jurisdictions and see where everybody else is at. So the proposed fine schedule I have for the rules and regulations would be the first offense, which are for things like dogs off leash. Those things would move from $75 to $100. The second offense would be $200. And then of course, any offense after that would be the maximum, which would be $300. Our fines for closures, disorderly conduct, resource protection, and violations of 9A, those would move from $150 to $200. And 9A is our motorized vehicles on trails or somebody driving into one of our parks in a meadow. So that would increase by $50. Our parking assessments would also increase. So as you saw before, this is the ticket we write most often. This year we've written a lot of these tickets. I don't know the numbers just yet, but huge increases. So the parking offense fines would move from $25 to $50, second offense up to $100, third offense to $150, and then let's hope that gets the message across. Finally, the parking assessments for rules 9D and F. These are unattended vehicles, people that leave their vehicles in the parks overnight, and vehicles that impede emergency vehicles. Those would increase from $50 to $75. And finally, the 9E is our handicap parking. That would increase from $100 to $150. So basic increases there. And here's kind of just a quick chart to show you our current fines, the proposed fines, and where we are in line with Jefferson County, Larimer County, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I think as you can see, there's some areas where we're a little bit higher. Resource protection, closed areas in particular, I think we have a higher regard for the areas that we've decided to close to the public. So our fines are a little bit higher than our neighbors. But otherwise, we're really all in about the same area, the same ballpark with our regulations at this time. You'll see Larimer County kind of sets theirs at $75 for everything. The state's $100 for everything. We like to have a little variety in our fines. So we're in a few different areas. So that's my proposal for an increase to the fine schedule. And there's just a few existing regulations that I would like to propose some changes to. And you can follow along in the edited version of the rules and regulations that was provided in your packet. Number 6 is a change to our camping regulation that better defines camping. We've had difficulties with people questioning what it means to be camping on our property. So I'll read the revision to you. And at number 6, camping, it shall be unlawful to camp overnight in a tent or other shelter, or to occupy any vehicle, trailer, or camper for overnight camping on open space lands, except in designated areas at the Boulder County Fairgrounds or when approved by the director or their designee. So you can see we've just expanded that regulation and made it much more clear on what camping is. And that's in line with the other jurisdictions in the area as well. And that language there was taken from the city of Boulder and Jefferson County. Number 9, this is a real easy addition. I don't know if many of you have seen the kind of the skateboards that are one giant wheel and they're electric powered. We've started to see some of those on our regional trails. So we've just added that to this regulation that would prohibit mini bikes, electric scooters, and low powered scooters. So pretty basic. That's one we have to change quite often because of the new technologies that are out there on our parks. Number 19, commercial activity. As many of you know, we prohibit most commercial activities on our parks, but we do allow still photography. So we allow things like graduation pictures, wedding pictures, family pictures. The one thing that we've been seeing a lot more of that we haven't been able to manage as well is large corporations taking pictures of vehicles for commercial purposes or ads in magazines. So things like Subaru or a lot of hiking gear companies and climbing companies that want to take pictures of people using their gear on our property. We think that the intent of this commercial activity is actually to prohibit those kind of activities on open space. We, of course, don't want to prohibit family photos or graduation photos, but photos for commercial marketing or advertising purposes have been added to that regulation. So I think that's a good change too, and it'll help some of our staff be able to issue permits more readily than we have in the past, or even to deny some permits. The next change is disorderly conduct. And this adds a few statements about you can't do things that would harm yourself or others. And then we've removed the amplification of sound into its own regulation. So I will read those to you. It shall be unlawful for any person to engage in any activity or behavior within an open space area which interferes with the health, safety, or welfare of themselves, other users, or adjacent landowners. So that's just a real basic change to the regulation we already have. And then finally, amplification of sound. It shall be unlawful to use sound amplification devices within open space areas or to permit any unreasonably loud noises that disturb others, except for leased events at the Boulder County Fairgrounds. We've received a lot of complaints over the last few years of hikers and mountain bikers using Bluetooth speakers or radios and things like that while they're out on their rides. So this would give us a really clear regulation to prohibit the use of those speakers if we need to. The final change, and this is a change that's being made really in many places, is the idea of interference and eluding. So this updates our regulation about interference and then adds eluding and evading park rangers to that. So let me read that for you. It shall be unlawful to knowingly obstruct, impair, or hinder the performance of a Boulder County Park Ranger or other open space employee who is acting in the performance of their duties, or to give false or misleading information with the intent to mislead said person in the performance of their duties. And 28B reads, it shall be unlawful to evade, elude, or attempt to elude a Boulder County Park Ranger by any means, or fail to comply with a lawful request of an open space in an open space area. So two basic changes. I was actually reviewing some narratives on citations just today, and one of them actually had somebody that just handed over their driver's license to the ranger and then decided to drive away. So this regulation would allow us to write them for eluding the lawful order of a park ranger, which is needed. All right, and I actually think I might have skipped one of the changes. Let me just back up. And finally, 23 there, closures. So right now, our closure regulation basically says that we can close a park for public safety, wildlife, revegetation issues up to 4 weeks with the director's approval. After that 4-week period, we would go to the commissioners and ask them for an extension of the closure. What we did with this regulation was we decided to rewrite it so that it fits better with our practice and really to remove some of the policy from the regulations. So basically, this would give us the opportunity to close a park for any designated period of time. Of course, we'd still inform the Board of County Commissioners about the closure, but it wouldn't be required in the regulations. We would do that as a matter of policy or best practice rather than having that in the regulations. And then finally, 23C, this allowed for the use of the Lindsay property, which is in the very south end of the county, to be used for the retrieval of remote control gliders. Unfortunately, the area that was allowed to happen has been removed by CDOT and is no longer available for public access. So that I can remove pretty easily, and it's no cause of our own. So that is all I had for you tonight. Are there any questions about those changes or revisions to the regulations?
Yeah, Bevan, this is Trace Baker. Thank you very much. I do have a question about Section 6, camping.
Yep.
And it's, the language, it shall be unlawful to camp overnight in a tent or other shelter. And yet there have been many, many times over the years when my wife and I just throw out a tarp and put our bags on the tarp and sleep and prepare food without bothering to take the tent out of the Jeep. So should this be generalized to talk about overnight sleeping and not specific in the tent or a shelter?
Trace, we did this on purpose because our after hours regulation allows for us to write a ticket to someone that's on our property after hours. So if we found you and your wife just out there laying in one of the meadows at Patasso, we would likely write you for being on the property after hours. Whereas camping, we wanted to be more specific about what the action of camping is. Looking at all the other local jurisdictions, they've defined it as being in a tent. So we've built in some redundancy into the rules and regulations so that we can address just exactly what you explained.
Okay, and thank you very much. And no, we have never slept out on a county property.
Hey, Bevan, Ann Obenchain, question about number 19. Have you given some thought to expressly calling out fitness or exercise classes? I see an awful lot of mountain bike classes or clinics, yoga classes, running classes on the trails. Wondering if that would be worth consideration.
Yeah, and we handle that in the commercial activity policy that we use when we go ahead and approve and deny permits. So if you're running an exercise class for profit, or any of the individuals that are signing up for an exercise class are paying a fee, we'll deny that and we can write that under this regulation. However, if you want to offer an exercise class or a running class or go out and ride as a group, you are allowed to do that as long as there's not an exchange of money.
Is there any limit to size of group?
Yeah, so all of our size limit, that's actually in Regulation 20, which is special use, has to be less than 25.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, we get that often, so that's a great question.
Evan, this is Tony Lewis. First, I was thinking about Trace's problem. I think, Trace, you're fine if you actually elude the ranger, not attempt to elude. You'll be all right. I have a question, but I'm sorry, it's not well formulated. But I was thinking about the fines. And there's a natural tendency to increase fines over time. Keep up with the neighbors and make it painful to people. The problem with fines, though, is that it's more painful to some people than to others. And so, like, part of where my head goes is if you're from Vietnam, you're a recent immigrant, and you're fishing at Stearns Lake, and by the way, you couldn't understand anything on that signboard, and you get $100 ticket, that means you can't pay rent that month. And so I'm just trying to figure out, and I think some of this is just ranger discretion, right? In how they approach people on, and I think they generally do a great job. But I'm still just trying to figure out in my own head the relationship of increasing fees and who that disproportionately affects.
Right.
And so I don't know if you guys have had conversations about that, but it's worrisome to me at some level, not just this, but like in general.
Absolutely. So Tony, we had these discussions early this summer. And typically the folks that have difficulty paying our fines tend to be younger individuals. So what we've done is we've implemented the restorative justice program at Parks and Open Space. So basically, if we get the inclination that somebody may have difficulty paying a fine, if we sense that, or if they tell us that flat out, and sometimes people do, we can go ahead and put them in the restorative justice program, which is basically community service in lieu of paying a fine. It's a program that we've set up between Parks and the county sheriff's office. And basically somebody would sign a contract. We would agree that, hey, this is 5 hours of community service. They would assign a contract that says they will do it. And then the really great thing about this is that we provide the community service. So let's say it was something with fishing at Stearns Lake. Hopefully we'd be able to set up a project that has to do with Stearns Lake that we would work with them on the service project and get it done. So it's pretty exciting. We've used it mostly for teens. Their parents love it. And we do projects that were specifically directed towards. The one example I have from the summer is we had 3 teens that vandalized one of our historic barns. So they spent 6 hours with one of the rangers cleaning up the vandalism at another site. And then they actually had to write an essay on the importance of stewardship in open space. That was all contracted. And once they did that, then the fine was erased. So we're really working as a group to ensure that we listen to our visitors, that if they say something like, I can't afford this fine, that we take it seriously. Like you said, we have discretion to issue a warrant, or not a warrant, but a warning, or to put them into restorative justice. So I think most rangers would probably just be like, all right, this is a warning and move on. So we're really talking about that as we look at these fines again, we'll keep that lens intact for sure.
That's awesome. Thank you. That really makes me happy that you guys are figuring that out.
We're excited about restorative justice because we just feel it's a better way to interact with our visitors, to help them understand why stewardship is so important. And we do know there's people in the community that can't afford these fines.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony, for asking a question that I learned something at tonight about what my own staff are doing.
It's always good.
It's always good. But I also learned something else, and that is when one of the rangers catch Trace and his wife out camping, they're going to get the maximum fine. So.
Unless they elude.
That's right. Well, and Trace, that's an extra $300, man. So.
Okay, I'll watch it.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Bevan? Okay, great. Thanks, Bevan. That's always entertaining.
Oh, thank you.
Could I have a motion on this action item from POSAC, please?
I move that we accept the recommendations from staff and change language and the fees.
Do I have a second?
Trace Baker, second.
Excellent. All in favor? Oh, any discussion? Sorry. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstention? Bevan, you win.
All right. Hey, thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
All right,
Bevan.
thank you. Have
Thanks,
a good
Bevan.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, last up on the agenda, we're not too far behind. We have the director's update.
Yeah, and in lieu of giving you a laundry list of what's been going on this month, I thought we could keep it short and sweet. And I asked Therese if she could give you a very brief update on where we're at in the recovery process at Heil, just so that we keep you posted along the way of how the planning is going and where we're at. So Therese, take it away.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here, and I promise this is going to be fast and fun. All right, can you see it? Okay, so you all know the fire started October 17th, and this is what it looked like from the plains of Boulder County. And this is what it looked like from Kevin's house. This is Kevin Grady's house. And luckily his house and that barn right there, the fire came down, burned around them, and did not touch either of those two structures. This is what it looked like from Highway 36 back burning so that we could get it out before it hit Lyons. And then this is what the burn perimeter looks like. So just a quick, the red line is where all it burned. That's about 10,000, just slightly over 10,000 acres. About half of it is county open space. So this dark green is Heil Valley Ranch. All the light green is CalWood and other conservation easements right in here. Heil goes further up here, but basically we're looking at least half of the burned acres on land that we own and manage. So this is what it looked like after the fire kind of died. You can see the trail, and you see in some areas didn't get, it's like a nice prescribed burn here. And then in some other areas, every tree's dead. So this is where we are starting by looking at what damage was out there. Luckily, I told you Kevin's house and the barn were fine. The bathrooms are fine. This is kind of the major structure that Parks and Open Space had damaged. So 2 bridges, and these are bridges that get you to the Lichen Loop. This is an area where we had done prescribed fire and thinning in the past. In an area like this, we don't really anticipate a whole lot of need for any restoration. In an area like this, where everything's burned, the likelihood is that the soil is also really impacted. It may be hydrophobic, and it may be very prone to erosion. So what we're working on right now is we're working with the U.S. Forest Service, and what they do is they help us put together a burn severity map. So again, there's the perimeter, Highway 36 over here on the right, and the dark red means that's where it was most severely burned. This is the soil burn severity map. If you think of Heil Valley Ranch is primarily over here, you think, oh, great, it's not that bad, it's more severely burned over here. But just for perspective, this is the Gear Canyon drainage. It crosses over onto Forest Service and to us. And this is where we would expect a lot of soil erosion because it is the biggest drainage on the burn area. After we get the burn severity map, then we work with USGS and a host of other experts, and they do like a slope analysis, and they look at defining the watersheds. And then our next step is identifying all the values at risk. So a few examples of what values at risk are like the left-hand water district, where their intakes are, what homes are downstream, what bridges and culverts are out there, what roads like Left-Hand Canyon or 36 could be impacted if we had debris flows and flooding as a result of the fire. And of course, we're always concerned about POS infrastructure. So again, if you're just looking at this is kind of the big Gear Canyon drainage. Comes down here, heads right out to Left-Hand Canyon Drive. This is where Left-Hand's water intake is, and this is a huge community. It's the neighborhood right at the base of 36 and Left-Hand Canyon. I believe it's called, actually, I cannot remember the name of it. So these are all the values at risk that we're assessing, and that will help us determine where we're going to do any action on the fire. So the BEAR team is getting together now. They're doing field visits, and it has a host of experts on it. And then NRCS, which is Natural Resources Conservation Service. They have an emergency watershed protection program. We have already sent our request to them with the county commissioners agreeing to be the local sponsor, which is what you need. So it's a 75-25 cost share on whatever emergency response measures we will take. Then NRCS works with us to do a damage assessment. So they'll use all the information that I just described, and they'll come up and say, okay, we should do aerial mulching here, seeding here, replace these culverts. So they'll come up with a list of what we should do. And then we hope to implement it in early spring. And some of the actions that we might take, these are unfortunately pictures from our archives of the 4 Mile Fire. So we can do seeding, which you see on the left. This is straw mulch on the right. And what we do with the straw mulch is we hire helicopter companies and they get their swinging baskets out here and they load up the mulch and they take it out and fly it over the burned area. And then they drop it. And that is a good way to protect the soil and stop erosion that could damage those values at risk. So that's probably the biggest thing that we're going to do. So our next steps are finalize the agreements with NRCS, get the funding in place, find out how much they're willing to pay for these actions. Then as a local sponsor, we will also be responsible for working with the private landowners. So all the conservation easements and any of the private landowners, we, Boulder County, and all those partners we talked about, like NRCS and Soil Conservation Service, will work with private landowners. For example, if they have land that needs to get mulched, we will incorporate that into our actions. What this money does not do is anything on U.S. Forest Service land. So we're still figuring out what the Forest Service can implement and who could actually pay for that. Our goal is to implement this in the spring. And we have a lot of researchers interested in looking at what our treatments did. Did they change the fire? What about carbon and carbon loss after wildfires? So those are our next steps. And there you have it. Any questions?
Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Have you been in touch at all with Left Hand Ditch Company, who also gets the water out of there, to include them in your planning?
Yes, we have. So we have Left Hand Water, and then we also have St. Vrain and Left Hand Water Conservancy District and the Soil Conservation District, which basically represents all the ditch owners.
Okay, I'm thinking specifically of Left Hand Ditch as a separate entity that might be useful to include.
So I would say yes, they certainly know about it.
Okay.
We're also working with Left Hand Watershed Center, who has relationships with all the ditch companies as well. So
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I have a question from my neighbors in Lyons, looking for an update or a forecast on the Picture Rock trailhead from the Red Gulch trailhead, or the Picture Rock Trail from the Red Gulch trailhead up to the silo or the barn, or the car, and if there's any thoughts on partial opening of that trail in the near future.
Well, that's a good point to bring up. We really have not talked about that because with almost half of Heil burned, our immediate needs are public safety. Let's keep the property closed. But I think that's certainly something that we can talk about internally, see if there might be any logical stopping point so we could open part of the Picture Rock, because it did not burn up to the, that end of the property. So
I know a lot of people would appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm certainly one of them. Yeah, Therese, in your slide on the soil burn severity, is that something that is sensed directly, or is it modeled from temperature, or how do they come up with that?
It's magic.
Okay.
The U.S. Forest Service does it, and it's a combination of soil type, the vegetation burn severity, and then ground truthing.
Okay, gotcha. That's good enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thanks, Teresa. That's great.
Thank you.
Eric, do you have any other updates for us?
All I wanted to say was thanks, Teresa. That was really great and helpful, and we'll keep those updates coming to you. Secondly, happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe. And there was a third. The third was, it's been a long night. I appreciate your patience. Everything that we did tonight had to happen tonight because we've got to take those things to the board within the next 4 or 5 weeks to get them moving forward. So didn't put anything on the agenda tonight that didn't need to be on the agenda. So thanks for sticking with us.
Okay. All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, I'm going to go ahead and wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and adjourn.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Bye, everybody.